All right, the stream has started and we should be live, everybody. We are live and there's 4 of us that I see who are here. All right, we got 4. All right. If you guys can hear me, let me know in the chat. Mm-hmm. And if we're live, if you can see me, let me know in the chat as well. How is everyone doing out there in the world? Hunam says we're on. Are we on? You guys hear me? Yeah. You guys see us? Let me get a gallery view here so you can see all 3 of us here. All right. How's everyone doing? Yes, I see some emoticons of a dog, so that means that they see our 4th guest.
Buddy.
All right. All right. How is everyone doing today in the world? Thank you for joining us for another live stream where we will be discussing Ukrainegate, hoax, and Syria pullout, which I think are oddly connected to each other because I've dubbed this swamp wars. And I think it's going to be a really interesting chat because we have 2 experts on Ukraine and on Syria. And I think we'll get a lot of insight as to the history of Ukraine and how we got to where we are today. And so let's see where people are joining us from before we get rolling. Let's see. Hello, Helen. How are you? Good to see you here. Hello from India. Hello from Holland. Let's see. Hi, Alex, Alexander, Peter. Yes, we hear you. Great. Thank you very much, Noreen. Hello from New York. Phoenix FP40 says live at last. Yes, we are live. It's been a while since we've done a live stream, actually. Been traveling around a bunch. Let's see. Trey Gowdy's on Trump's team. Yes, we will talk about Trey Gowdy as well. Absolutely. Hello, Nigel. How are you doing in London? Hello from Atlanta, Georgia, Melbourne, Sheffield, Czech. Where else are people joining us from? Let's see. New York, Perth, Australia, North Carolina, Slovenia, London calling, Brisbane. And I was just about to walk the dog, says Bill. All right. Hello from Canada. How are you doing, everybody in Canada?
Well, Bill probably should have walked the dog because we're going to be here for a little while.
We got a lot to discuss. Absolutely. These are 2 very big topics. Australia, Thailand, Bulgaria, Serbia, Norway, Lithuania. Greetings from the USSA, Belleville, Illinois, Denmark, Memphis, Wellingborough. I've been to Memphis. Great place. Very cool. Hello from the Philippines and Texas, UK, Peterborough, UK. UK is here. UK in the house. San Diego, Netherlands, Manchester, UK. A. Sanchez says Duran rules. Well, we're trying to get to 100,000. So before I forget, guys, smash that like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel as well. And make sure to click that notifications bell so that you get notifications. And share the channel with everybody you know outside of YouTube. YouTube really likes it when the channel is shared on other networks and platforms. So make sure you share the channel. Help us get to 100K subscribers. We are very close. Hello from Virginia, from Sweden and Canada as well.
Well, why don't you sweeten the pot here? You know, help us get to 100,000. And all 3 of us will get together in Moscow and we will do a live show. All 3 of us probably sitting around, sitting around a table. We'll have a camera on us and we'll have a nice chat over some non-alcoholic beer. Okay?
Peter, okay? You're giving away the secrets.
No, I'm trying to
just
tease.
Joking.
You gotta tease it.
Just joking. That's something that you guys can expect when we get to 100,000. Hello from Greece. I was just in Greece. I'm not in Greece anymore, but we do have someone who's in Moscow, and that is the host of RT's Crosstalk, Mr. Peter Lavelle. Peter, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing much better than the weather. It's pretty drizzly here. It's that short moment between autumn and winter. So you have to understand in Moscow, the spring is short and the autumn is even shorter. So we're going into a full-blown winter in a matter of days.
All right. And let's see. Hello from Odessa, Ukraine. Hey, Jack. How are things in Ukraine? We'll be talking a lot about the country that you're in right now. Yes, magic mugs for all. And we have in London, the man holding a Lavrov magic mug.
Magic mug.
You know, the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. How are you doing, Alexander?
I'm very well, and I was listening to Peter, and I was thinking that at least he gets seasons. What we get in England, at least in London, is November all the year round. It never changes. But still, believe it or not, it's a bright day, but it's great to be here on the channel again and doing a live. We haven't done one, as you rightly say, for a while.
Yeah, we'll see.
Because
of the weather, you guys had to conquer the world, okay? Because you have bad weather and bad food, so you had to go elsewhere, okay? So, all right. I was going to say one more thing, but I think it's kind of, new era thing I want to stay away from.
Yes, I mean, was it about mad dogs and Englishmen stay out of the noonday sun? There we go.
All right, what do you guys say? Should we get rolling?
Yeah. Let's.
All right, so Peter, Alexander, I'm just going to throw it out to you guys. Mm-hmm. Trump has now pulled out troops from Syria, or at least that's what he's announced.
Part of Syria.
That was his, I think it was 3 or 4 tweets that he sent out that, just put all the neocons and the neoliberals, they were just clutching their pearls, in absolute horror. All of a sudden, everyone's very concerned about the Kurds. Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Cuomo, Lemon, everyone. All of a sudden, everyone's concerned about the Kurds.
They wouldn't know a Kurd if it hit him in the face. Right?
And on the other side of the equation, we have this impeachment inquiry going on. And, the interesting part about it, the part that jumped into my mind, Peter, Alexander, was I was thinking, say the Democrats, I think, Alexander, you stated that you think the Democrats are way too in deep right now to pull away from actually going forward with an impeachment. So say they go forward and it reaches the Senate, and we've all been saying there's no way the Senate will impeach Trump, but all of a sudden you have this Syria pullout in the mix. I don't know if it changes the calculus at all, because you have people like Lindsey Graham, actually Mitt Romney, and a lot of senators who have come out against Trump now. And Peter, you always say that, the cardinal sin of any president is to go against the military industrial complex and to go against war. So it looks like, it hasn't been done yet, but it looks like Trump is about to commit the most cardinal of sins.
Yeah,
so Peter, just start from that framework, and let's just push this conversation forward. Peter, Alexander, the floor is yours.
It is a cardinal sin. We've characterized it correctly. However, Donald Trump wants to be reelected, so he's going to have to go against the national security state, and we'll see if he survives it. Okay, I mean, the situation, every single time we've done a lot, and I mean every single lot we've ever done, we've talked about what's going on in northern Syria, and the situation is simply untenable. What Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney and all these other clowns on foreign policy, do they want to see 2 NATO countries, the 2 strongest, most powerful NATO countries, troop-wise, go have a clash? I mean, because Erdogan has made it very clear. He's made it very clear. And so, do the United States wants to remain in harm's way, protecting an ally that one of their patrons, the Kurds? The Kurds were only a tool. They've always been a tool. Yeah. In the last 100 years, the West has put the Kurds down 8 times. Okay, so I mean, if you can get Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Turkey to agree to a Kurdish state, then fine, you have one. But those 4 states I just mentioned will never allow that. That is the unfortunate fate of the Kurds. They're never going to have their own state, because and you can actually throw in Armenia. There are Kurds in Armenia even. There are 40 million Kurds. Okay, and their real promise is what we have said for years. And in the entire history of our podcast, the Kurds and the government in Damascus have had a tacit understanding ever since 2011, because American troops are there. That the movement towards bringing those 2 parties, the Kurds and the Damascus government, closer, it's been, the impediment has always been American troops, American support. And now, I mean, everyone's crying to God, save the Kurds. Well, get out, and the Kurds and the government in Damascus will come to an understanding. This happened all the way back at the end of last year, in December of last year, the Damascus government made it very clear that they would be willing to work with the Kurds. The background, folks, for well over a year now, actually ever since 2015, there's been talk and movement towards constitutional reform inside of Syria. What does that mean? Constitutional reform is a code for more autonomy for the Kurds. So the train is moving along here. The hysterics in Washington and the media is just beyond belief. It's completely empty. All right. Trump is taking this as an opportunity to fulfill his promise, to start bringing troops home. All right. And Trump's top priority is Trump. And there's no other priority. It's him. And he's going to move forward with it. Now, it's only in the area, the border area, 30 kilometers in. This is where the Kurds, the Turks are eyeing some kind of stability zone. And because of military might, they're going to get their way. But it doesn't solve Idlib. It doesn't solve a lot of problems. And Erdogan, as we said in our lives, Erdogan has to start making some decisions, because the Russians are pressuring him, the Americans are pressuring him, the government in Damascus has a hardened and trained and experienced military. I mean, Turkey is really in trouble in all of this here, but never the focus is on Turkey. It's always about the Kurds and Trump. The prism in which the media and official Washington is looking at this is completely wrong. It's wrong-minded. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, I mean,
Alexander, before you begin, can I just throw a question at you? A very quick question, more of a comment from Paul. It says Kurds, YPK, SDF, PKK. Who's who?
Oh, they're all one and the same. The YPG, yes. The YPG is the name of the Kurdish party in Syria. The PKK is the name of the Kurdish party in Turkey. The PKK and the YPG work very, very closely together, and they share a similar ideology. And the SDF is this umbrella organization that the Kurds have created, which attaches various Arabic parties, but is basically dominated by
Kurds.
Syria. So, I mean, to be absolutely clear, we're talking about one and the same group of people. But if we need to be precise, we should talk about the YPG in Syria and the PKK in Turkey. Though, as I said, they are essentially the same ideology, the same people, the same group. Now, can I just say, Peter's absolutely right. I agree with everything he says, except I would make one further point, which is that, of course, all this outrage, all this anger about the betrayal of the Kurds, it isn't about the Kurds at all. It is about Assad. The whole Syrian conflict is about Assad. Some people in Washington, a lot of people in Washington, the foreign policy establishment in Washington has been trying to use the Kurds as a tool. Peter was absolutely right to use that word. They were trying to use them as a tool to partition Syria, detach the northeast provinces of Syria from Syria, and to use those provinces as a barrier to impose an economic and oil blockade on the country. They're trying to blockade Syria's access to its oil supplies through the Mediterranean Sea. That was what all that business with the Iranian oil tanker was all about. And they've also used these Kurdish-controlled areas in northeast Syria to mount airstrikes, American airstrikes, on convoys bringing oil to Syria, across Iraq, from Iran, through eastern Syria by land. So that's what this is all about. Ultimately, it always comes down to this disastrous obsession with bringing down the government of Bashar al-Assad. They tried protests, they tried wars, they backed jihadi movements against him, they brought in their own troops, purportedly to fight ISIS, but a lot of the time, on several occasions, they carried out airstrikes on Syrian military formations. And now this is the last throw. It is trying to use the Kurds to destabilize Syria in order eventually to engineer the overthrow of Assad. And who comes along? Donald Trump comes along and he says, well, I'm not really prepared to play this game. I'm not interested in it. I don't think America has any interest in it. As far as I'm concerned, it's all a waste of time and a waste of costs, and potentially can lead to all kinds of trouble. So last year, he twice tried to pull the US troops out of Syria and was blocked from doing so. Now, as Peter absolutely rightly says, he is only withdrawing them from a small area of northeast Syria in order to try to keep some kind of relationship going with Turkey, which is the US's major NATO ally in the region. And because of that, because this somehow weakens the obsessive drive to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, the foreign policy establishment in Washington is furious. This is the price of the obsession.
Yeah, okay, and a number of points there I think we really have to make clear, because you never see it, and I know American media best, obviously, but from Fox to MSNBC to CNN, it's never ever mentioned once that the United States is in Syria illegally under international law. They have no right to be there. They have no right to dictate what government is in Syria. Number two, you can't, Mitt Romney and the rest of them, we have to stay because there could be a return of ISIS. Well, listen up, you stupid senators. There was no ISIS in Syria until you destabilized the government in Damascus. There was no ISIS there. There was no ISIS in Iraq also. There was no ISIS in Libya until you started fiddling with the regimes. I mean, this is common sense stuff here, okay? And plus, with an American withdrawal, which is very small, 2,000 troops, okay? When they leave, then the region has to take care of itself. I sound like a broken record. I've been saying this for years. They will have to come together and come to terms. And they will come to terms. And the Russians have been there good with their good diplomatic services. They work around the clock at the foreign ministry, cleaning up all these horrific interventions and shenanigans all of the time. They can talk to everyone. And they've made it very clear to the Kurds that you will have a place inside of Syria. And we're supporting that. I mean, even to the point where my gut tells me the foreign ministry is twisting the wrists of Assad to say, come on, you've got to move forward with this. And I think this got some traction, okay? Another point I'd like to point out that really infuriates me. It took about 20 Russian planes in 6 weeks to destroy the caliphate. That's how it was destroyed. Not hundreds of millions of dollars in training these folks and training those folks, because all the people they trained, virtually every single one of them changed sides and took their equipment and money with them to fight with terrorists and foreign jihadis. 6 weeks, 20 planes. Let that sink in here. So what was the US doing with its proxies all these years? What the Russians can do in 6 weeks, they couldn't do? With the American Air Force, with the Israelis? My goodness. Western media is just utterly shameless and shameful in the way they've covered this. They don't tell you the basic facts. So I applaud Trump for doing this, okay? He's keeping a campaign promise. And believe me, if you go to the heartland, you go to red states, people are saying, yeah, what are we doing there anyway? Oh, by the way, we're still in Afghanistan 18 years later? Huh? What's that mean? People are asking these questions, and Trump understands it. And to go to what Alexander Christopher was saying, going against the military-industrial intelligence state, well, Trump's already in deep hot water with them anyway. I mean, what's the downside right now? Okay, I mean, they're already going. I mean, look, every single accusation made against Trump that is related to some form of impeachment, everything has come from the intelligence community. They have 6 ways to Sunday to get you. We've seen that in play for 3 years.
Yeah,
Alexander, yeah, you wanna jump in and maybe you can explain why, if it's such a small presence, a U.S. presence in Syria, then why the hell is Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney and all these guys going so crazy? What difference is
You
that
could
small,
never leave. You could
right?
never leave.
What's the difference that this small, force, this a small American force in Syria? What's it going to make? What's the reason to have it there? I mean, we know the reasons, but I think you can express some depth to it.
Right. The reason that the US forces are there are not to defeat ISIS. It is to keep the Syrian army out of these regions. It acts as a tripwire to stop the Syrian army reoccupying these territories in northeast Syria and along the border with Jordan, which the United States wants to keep control of. And can I just come back to the point that Peter was making? If the United States really wants to prioritize the final and complete destruction of ISIS, the simplest and fastest and most certain way to do that is to allow the Syrian army to re-enter these areas. Whenever the Syrian army has fought ISIS, it has invariably won, always. And of course, now it's backed by the Russians. If the Syrian army re-entered these territories, ISIS would be finished once and for all. It has already been broken, and Peter's absolutely right, mainly by Syrian army offensives backed by the Russians.
Right.
That's the truth of it. I mean,
well, and let's give credit where credit's due. Hezbollah did some heavy lifting as well.
Hezbollah did some heavy lifting. But anyway, but coming back to this, if you want to keep ISIS alive,
stay.
Exactly. Stay. Keep Syria weak and divided.
Yep.
Because that's the way a terrorist organization like that will cling on.
Because it has an obvious grievance, foreign occupation.
Yeah. Exactly. So they're doing the diametric opposite of what they profess is needed to defeat ISIS. And Donald Trump is absolutely right. If you withdraw the troops, if the Syrian army goes in, then, as I said, ISIS is over. It finishes. Now, I come back to this. People like Lindsey Graham and all the others, the whole foreign policy mob in Washington, ultimately, their priority is not defeating ISIS. It never has been. Peter was asking this question, this rhetorical question, why was it impossible for the United States to achieve what the Russian Air Force was able to do with 20 planes? It wasn't possible because they never tried.
You know what they did? Yeah. What they did was they didn't fight terrorists. They literally were trying to destroy the Syrian state. What they did was destroy infrastructure. They didn't go after terrorists. They wanted to destabilize Syria so much, make it a failed state, literally a failed state, a non-functioning state that would allow political change in their favor. It didn't work.
It didn't work.
Remember this. It's the Assad family comes from a group of what's called the Alawites. Okay, it is a form of Shia Islam. All right, the majority of the Syrian Arab army are Sunni, and they are fighting Sunni terrorists. Okay. And look at the ethnic cleansing that goes on when you have ISIS and their associated groups around. What is the fate of Christians in Syria? They throw their allegiance to Assad because they're protected by Assad and his government. Okay, none of these things are ever mentioned in Western media. It is so nauseating. Yeah. Okay, and we can't forget the very important Greek word here, hubris. Okay, because the perception, it's really kind of like a Vietnam syndrome. You know, if Saigon falls, the dominoes all through Asia fall, and they haven't learned from that whatsoever. And what they're also looking at, because of hubris, they're looking at Iran, failed policy towards Iran, and they will say this is a victory for Iran. Well, Iran was invited into Syria. Okay. It has problems of its own at home, but they will not allow the government in Damascus to be illegally overthrown by the use of force. Okay, What kind of refugee problem would that create? Oh my goodness, all right? All throughout the region, all right? The US, this is what it's gotten down to. They, for years, and I think they still do, would prefer to see a terrorist, jihadist black flag over Damascus than to have Assad continue ruling. Look, his popularity has gone up immensely during this conflict. Like most Arab armies, very, very corrupt, lack of resource allocation. And now, because of this conflict, you have a lean and mean fighting machine that are staunchly loyal now to the government. This is what's happened. Look at Aleppo. Aleppo is a normal city again.
Yeah.
And that's never reported. It's never reported in Western media. They were liberated by the Syrian Arab army with the help of Russian air power. But that story went down the rabbit hole, didn't it? Nobody ever talks about that as they rebuild their lives. Also, just to kind of reiterate what was something we said earlier, the US stays in Syria to be a spoiler, because it doesn't want the Syrian state to rebuild. And they're denying the Syrian state its sovereignty. And of course, the Syrian army is not going to attack those forces. That's exactly what Washington wants, okay? So Assad has been very, very patient. And I think with the advice of the Russians is that, you know, you're gonna have to worry about the Turks probably more. And the Russians have leverage with the Turks to see how this plays out. Now, the real end game is how Syria and Turkey deal with the Kurdish question. It's not how the US will, because the US is lost. And it's because of its hubris, it won't leave. But it's going to be Syria, Turkey, and representatives of the Kurdish people inside of Syria, not inside of Turkey, no way, inside of Syria. And this is how this is going to be resolved. It's going to be hard, sober diplomacy that could take a while. But you know what? That could probably work out better when there are no guns being fired on the battlefield. And this is what should happen.
Yeah. Alexander, what is you mentioned the priority of the Lindsey Grahams and the Mitt Romneys and all these guys, and neocons, and even the neoliberal establishment. What are those priorities that they have? Is it the military-industrial complex? Is it Israel? And you also have a Netanyahu who's also kind of, you know, floating around. He's been weakened as well. I mean, what are the priorities for them to insist on remaining in Syria?
I think there's all kinds of different things working all at the same time. I mean, at one level, clearly there is a big geopolitical play. It's weakening Iran, strengthening Israel, strengthening the position of the United States. At the same time, I think for a lot of these people, it's a question also of prestige and of faith. The United States committed itself to overthrowing Bashar al-Assad. And it's very difficult for people who are part of the government of the so-called hyperpower, the country, the exceptional country that sees further and is, you know, all powerful, that it has failed completely again in a war of this kind. There's also on the part of many of these people, not by the way I think so much Lindsey Graham himself, a personal animus against Donald Trump.
Of course,
yes. I mean, it plays that plays another factor. But can I just, by the way, quickly address a point that you made in your very first question? I don't think, despite the fact that many Republican senators are not going to be happy about this pullout from northern Syria, I don't think that is going to affect, in the end, the way they will vote in an impeachment trial.
I agree.
Because the politics of that are so radically different. And I think also they know very well that if they went down that rabbit hole, they would absolutely incense the Republican base. So I don't think that's going to have that kind of effect. But the fact is, the entire foreign policy elite in Washington, Democrat and Republican, has long ago been captured by neoconservatism or neoliberalism, or call it whatever you will. To my mind, those two terms, by the way, mean exactly the same thing. I mean, there's no fundamental difference between them. And these people, whatever their individual precise motives may be, the fundamental fact about them is that they don't have a reverse gear. They won't pull out of Afghanistan, even that's clearly failed. They won't pull out of Syria, even though that's obviously failed. Iraq, exactly. They cannot countenance and accept retreat. Whenever the suggestion is made that the United States should retreat, these people always
but don't you think that's just really kind of it's a linguistic issue here? It's retreat, and that's how they see it. But I mean, staying is more costly than leaving. Geopolitically for the United States, particularly, and I would even say to some degree Europe, the Middle East is a backwater. It's a backwater. It's not the, excuse the word, the mecca of energy anymore. There's plenty of energy in the world here. Okay, obviously the arms manufacturers want to keep their contracts up. Okay, that's obvious, but that's not the only thing here. And it's not really about oil anymore, all right? The fact of the matter is, it is this exceptionalist pathology, is that you can't allow anywhere in the world for local actors to have agency. The U.S. must always decide on political outcomes, no matter where in the world. I mean, the irony of it all is that, we always hear from the EU and Washington, we don't believe in spheres of influence because that's the 19th century view of the world. Well, the United States sees the whole world as its sphere of influence, okay? No one can make decisions on their own without consultation from the proconsul, okay? And this is a mentality problem. And Trump is right. And let Trump blame Trump, fine, he's blamed for everything else. Again, let him be the first to do it. And once it starts yielding results, people are gonna say, this was a good move if he survives, okay? I think with the electorate, kind of dovetailing into another topic here, they don't, the public overall says, why are we in these wars? Trump wants to get out? Okay, good, that must be good, okay? I really want to stress to our viewers here, and I can speak about American media, Americans are not very well informed about this at all. No. They don't even know the very basics about it because they're never told. I mean, the average person that, with a full-time job or maybe two jobs, how much foreign news do they get received during the course of a month? Not a whole lot. So the American public has been very poorly served by the media because they don't know what's going on. Just, Trump wants to retreat. That's all they say. Well, retreat is a negative term by definition, okay? I mean, let's go to Douglas McGregor. I mean, our favorite on Fox News. I mean, the guy, he speaks like a crystal ball. I mean, he's so spot on. And this is an artificial crisis generated by the deep state, okay? The deep state, that's what their job is to police the world and spend tax dollar money. That's what they do, okay? They don't want anyone to get in the way of that. And someone is for the first time. And they detest it. They detest it. And they detest that Trump is going to make a decision because it was the adults in the room that got us into this mess in the first place, okay? I mean, just reading the New York Times and the Washington Post is so nauseating, as if they know better. They've been wrong on these things, all the way back to Bush Jr., okay? They've been catastrophically wrong on every single point. Why don't you give it a rest?
Alexander, Obama, Syria, Obama, Ukraine. Can you connect some dots for us here? Because a lot of the blame is always, like Peter said, it's always falling on Trump. Trump this, Trump that. Trump is pulling out of Syria. Trump, colluded with Zelensky. Trump and the Javelin missiles and all this stuff that's going on. But when you go back in time, all of this was created under the presidency of Barack Obama.
Well,
Syria and Ukraine specifically.
Trump undoubtedly inherited a terrible foreign policy legacy from Obama. I mean, Obama had, as you absolutely rightly say, he created a disaster in Ukraine by essentially facilitating a coup there, which is intended to bring that country eventually into NATO. I know that's not what people say, but that's clearly what the agenda is.
Clearly the case.
Clearly the agenda, exactly. He was also the president who, when the Arab Spring happened, they tried to use the Arab Spring to try to overthrow governments all over the Middle East, to install their own American vassals and their own kind of conception of what kind of policies that they would have. But I don't think it started with Obama. I think it goes back much further. I mean, George W. Bush administration was following very much the same policies. And so, of course, beforehand was Bill Clinton's administration. I mean,
NATO expansion.
And
yeah,
NATO expansion was the war against Yugoslavia, the bombing of Iraq that took place during that time, the siege of Iraq that took place that time. And it was during that time, during Bill Clinton's administration, that the United States first began to talk about exceptionalism, American exceptionalism, using the formula, that Madeleine Albright, Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, gave of the country that sees further and knows better
because it stands taller. Yeah,
stands taller,
exactly. Which is rather odd because she was a short woman. But anyway,
exactly. But what I will say is this: if it all began with Bill Clinton in a sense and got worse under George W. Bush, Obama gave it a particularly ugly turn because he came in. He was going to be the great peace president. He was given the Nobel Peace Prize before he even did anything. And of course, he took this very bad situation that he inherited from George W. Bush, and he made it much worse.
Accelerated it.
He accelerated it. I mean, he spread it to Ukraine. He spread it to Syria and Libya. I personally have no doubt that he was far more involved in all the big decisions involving all these conflicts and wars than he has ever admitted, or that his apologists have admitted on his behalf. I mean, I am sure that he was involved, for example, in the Ukrainian events, and I'm sure he was also very heavily involved in the Libyan events too, and I'm sure in all of them, in fact.
And Russiagate.
And Russiagate, in all of them. And
yeah, I really like to have Obama tell us about, well, what was Joe do? What was your Vice President Joe doing in Ukraine?
Exactly. Huh? I mean, this is the thing about Obama. I mean, I think I sent you I sent you an email recently about this, Alex. I mean, he's always there. He was always there as president, looking dignified in the Oval Office, making very complicated speeches that I could never understand, never really saying anything very clearly, and all these terrible things in Libya and Syria and Ukraine, in all kinds of places, would be going on. And we were always expected to think that somehow he wasn't really involved. It was always other people. It was Hillary Clinton or Victoria Nuland or all sorts of other people, Joe Biden or whatever. He must have been involved. It's inconceivable that these sort of things could have happened on his watch without him being involved. And as I said, because he covered his tracks in this way and did this in this very manipulative fashion, I think he has created a very poisonous legacy. Because whereas with someone like George W. Bush, you could say, well, this is the decisions of this particular president and his vice president, Dick Cheney, and they're both, frankly, fanatical and dangerous people. With Obama, because he did it in this manipulative fashion, he normalized it. He made it look like this is the conventional mainstream policy of the United States.
And don't forget Ben Rhodes. I think he's the one that did this. Yeah, I think he's the one that wrote the speeches. Yeah,
exactly. So that ultimately not only consolidated the position of this as a neocon, neoliberal foreign policy establishment, it legitimized it. And of course, the other thing Obama did was that he promoted all these neoliberal ideologues like Susan Rice and Samantha Power. And what you started to get was a whole deeply corrupt and very dangerous ideology of regime change, being intellectually created. And Obama was completely complicit in all of this. So, you know, there is a continuity that extends back beyond Obama, but Obama's own role was, in my opinion, a disastrous one. I mean, he made it much, much worse and created many of the problems that people today have in the United States when they try to push back against these policies. When Obama came in, it was mainstream to say that all these regime change wars was wrong. You could be a mainstream commentator and you could say it. Today, the entire mainstream is united behind it.
Except for Tucker.
Except for Tucker, well.
You know, but the interesting thing is that, you know, I haven't read the book and I won't unless I get it for free because I don't want to give Samantha Power any money for her recent book. But I read a review of it on the American Conservative website and she just completely whitewashes her role in Yemen. And that is an Obama story. Yeah. Yemen, okay? And so, you know, everyone knows watching these podcasts, I have a lot of problems with Donald Trump's foreign policy in a lot of areas here. And it was last December, we did a very gleeful podcast about his decision to withdraw from Syria. And, you know, now he's decided he's going to bite the bullet. I don't think he feels like he has anything to lose right now on this one here. Okay, and you know, on top of it, I mean, the rhetoric, you know, I mean, the way he's threatening the Turks, you know, if they don't do what he wants, he'll destroy their economy and destroy their currency. He should not be saying those type of things. Okay, I find it really quite shocking sometimes. Because it's giving Erdogan, and I'm looking at this from just being geopolitical here, it's giving Erdogan more options. And if you want to keep someone in your alliance, you try to limit options, not give your antagonist, and Turkey is an antagonist here in this situation, you don't give them more options. So I think with Obama, what happened under George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, it became normalized, and Obama just went for the ride. Okay, I mean, he was not a deep thinker, though everyone, he's a deep thinker, he's an intellectual, he wasn't, and he isn't. All right, and Alexander McCurris is right. The most effective thing he did as president is to make sure that he never takes the blame for anything that goes wrong. Okay, I mean, we're going to find out. Those last few weeks of the Obama administration, where they concocted Russiagate, when he allowed a huge number of people to have access to high-level security clearances. I mean, thousands of people suddenly had access where before it was really quite limited. And of course, this was to be used against Donald Trump. And we're going to find out how this all started. 3 cheers for Bill Barr. And the left is terrified of this guy now, terrified of him, because he's going to the sources. He's getting audio recordings. He's getting witnesses, okay? He's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. All right, to finally clear the air on this. That's one of the reasons why impeachment, they're pushing it harder and harder, because the other shoe is going to drop, and drop soon. Folks, buckle up, because the next few months are going to be wild, really wild, okay? Because the origins of Russiagate go back to the waning months of the Obama administration, okay? And we have a lot of hanger-oners. Trump, he's not, people don't want to go into his administration. We've said this 1,000 times, he has an HR problem. You have a lot of these hanger-oners in the deep state. They're snooping around. The second whistleblower, oh my God, when I read that, because I'm earlier than everyone else, so I wake up in the morning like, what's this now? Okay, obviously complete fabrications. And I'm sick and tired of it. I mean, even on Crosstalk, I try to stay away from it because I'm really tired of it. I mean, this is obviously bad political kabuki theater. It's really bad. It's really badly put together, okay? And the cast of characters, I mean, wow, talk about a B team.
Well, Alexander, can you say that Bush ushered in an era of neocon corruption, plundering, pillaging, especially when you're talking about Iraq. Can you say that Obama ushered in an era of neoliberal corruption when you're looking at Syria, Libya, Ukraine, all these places? I mean, I think you've mentioned the word a couple of times during our videos, the carpetbaggers that came to Kiev and just, plundered and took all the money, from Christine Lagarde to the Bidens to Pelosi and her family. Exactly. All these McCain and all these people that were showing up at the Maidan and showing up at the Ukraine parliament and just making so much money. 45 billion, I think, was the number.
Like they did in the early 90s in Russia.
Right.
Repeat.
It was just a repeat, and this was all under Obama's watch. So either Obama is a genius man behind the curtain, because nothing sticks to him, he doesn't get blamed for anything, or he was just kind of sleeping at the wheel, and everyone around him said, you know what, let's just start, raking.
Obama was the gateway. He was the gateway guy. Yes. Okay, he normalized all.
Absolutely. I mean, he first of all, he wasn't sleeping at the wheel. He's a highly intelligent man. He's a well-trained lawyer. The one thing is he knows how to hide his tracks, and there are a great many people in Washington who were helping him do that, because they needed this, pristine symbol of probity in high office to make all this carpetbagging that you mentioned, to make that easier. It began under I remember it beginning in earnest in the 1990s in Russia. And Peter may remember that there has been all kinds of stories about people, academics from Harvard, coming over to Russia, becoming advisors to the then Russian government, the Yeltsin government, and making millions. And that was, that was particularly shocking.
But they weren't foreign agents, were they?
Exactly.
Oh, never heard that term back then.
Exactly. And what was particularly shocking about that, as I said, was that they were academics and they were business people, so-called business people. I mean, also going into Russia. I mean, Peter was there. I think you saw it. I mean, you saw all of this. I saw it myself briefly when I went there in 1998. But I think, as I said, what happened under Obama is it became respectable. It became mainstream in a way that it wasn't even under George W. Bush. I mean, George W. Bush, you heard bad stories, but it never became as structural as it became under Obama. I mean, I find it very difficult to imagine the kind of things, some of the sort of things that we've been hearing about, the vice president's son being put in charge of a natural gas company, happening even in Russia in the 1990s. Who was Bill Clinton's vice president? I've forgotten nowadays. But I mean, having his son turning up.
Al Gore. He's very forgettable. Don't worry.
I know. Al Gore. I mean, imagine Al Gore's son, taking over Gazprom, getting a directorship at Gazprom at that time. It wasn't quite so blatant.
We could put some flesh on bones here. Remember Uranium One. Yeah. And the left's mantra is, well, all of these agencies and cabinet people signed off on it. But see, that is actually reinforcing exactly what we're saying in this conversation, that it had become so normalized. This corruption was so normalized that everybody just signed their name onto it. Oh, that's Hillary's thing. Okay, go fine. Check that box. It became normalized to the extent where they couldn't see how, in fact, it was corrupting American foreign policy. And then you have someone like Donald Trump and says, what's going on here? I didn't do this. I don't like this. I don't understand this. Why are we there? Because that's the way he is, all right? And he's made a lot of mistakes in foreign policy. I want to be very, very clear about that, okay? But I'll take a partial pullout of Syria any day of the week, okay? Because it will start something.
Yes.
And show the sky isn't going to fall. It's the next step is completely withdraw. And I'm not going to repeat myself. So the country and the region can start moving forward. American presence in the region does not allow that to happen. You have all of these client states that are weaklings, and they and it makes them appliant, where they don't have to make any decisions themselves. They just turn to Washington. What do they want? Okay. And that is the recipe for disaster. And then you will never leave the region that way, because you create regimes, client regimes, that are weak by their very nature. And the local populations do not like that and do not respect it, because they don't like seeing their political elites kowtowing, because they don't get any money out of it. Well, I mean, look at the average age in Middle Eastern countries. It's like 14, okay? What kind of future do they have under these governments? Not a good one. You know, and that's why we need a serious rethink here. And Trump, hopefully, knock on wood, is making that first small step. Okay, I'm not trying to be overly optimistic here, but it's a step in the right direction.
All right, Alexander, Jan says that attention Turkey just started a military operation in Syria. You've mentioned 45 billion was lost in Ukraine, Alexander. That was under Obama. That's a lot of money to kind of disappear, is it not?
Oh, huge. I mean, IMF money, $25 billion alone.
No one talks about that.
Absolutely. 17 billion from the European Union.
And it's 1 billion from old Joe.
Well, I know, 3 billion in US loan guarantees. And of course, they had an awful lot of their debt written off. I mean, the amount of money that's been thrown at Ukraine has been huge. And Ukraine is now a poorer country than it was before this all started. And the Ukrainian people are much poorer, but a number of people, a small number of people in Ukraine, but also it turns out in Washington, are an awful lot richer also.
What do you make of the operation right now that's taking place, Alexander, from Jan's announcement that Turkey started the military operation?
Yes,
expected?
I mean, yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, we've been seeing this come now for weeks. Actually, we've been following the news. I mean, Erdogan has been getting more and more impatient about the whole situation. Now, I have to say something. I mean, Erdogan is a difficult individual, unquestionably. He has his own grandiose ideas. He's not to be trusted at all with an inch or millimeter of Syrian territory, and he has this disastrous neo-Ottoman foreign policy, which has aspired to make Syria part of some kind of Turkish sphere of influence. But having said all of that, no Turkish leader would be happy to see the kind of Kurdish statelet that the United States has been intent on creating in northeast Syria in pursuit of its own objective of overthrowing Assad. So this ought to have been completely predictable. It should have been obvious to people in Washington that the Turks would be very unhappy at what the Americans were doing in Syria with the Kurds. And with a person like Erdogan, who's got his own problems in Turkey, which are, mounting, and who, by the way, still, I suspect, has difficulties with the army in Turkey. Getting the army out of Turkey and into Syria is one way of, making it, getting it further from him and securing his own position and winning some support in Turkey. But ultimately, what Erdogan is doing is not such a break from traditional Turkish policy. Yeah. No Turkish leader would want to see a statelet like this.
But because of Erdogan's approach, it is a statelet was within their grasp. You see how what he has done is actually create the conditions for something that he doesn't want in the first place. We also have to point out there's a lot of Kurds in Turkey. And this is a domestic issue for Erdogan as well. I mean, it's not talked a lot about. In fact, you get in a lot of trouble talking about the fate of the Kurds in Turkey. Okay, well, it was a journalist about 10 years ago was killed, and I think it was in Ankara for writing about the history of the Kurds. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but it's a domestic issue and it's also a foreign policy issue. And I will stand by my prognosis is that if you let, with American withdrawal, have the Kurds talk with Damascus, that is a step in the right direction, because the Russians have made it very clear, the Iranians have made it very clear that they want to see Syria to remain a sovereign state, and that means all of Syria, not giving away a 30 mile width buffer zone. That's not going to solve those problems. Okay, you need to have some kind of reconciliation with the Kurds, with the Damascus government, and then it can move forward. Do you think Assad wants to fight a war with Turkey? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. No. All right. So there's a lot of bluster here. Okay, yes. and Erdogan's really good at it. The thing is he has a propensity to screw up. Okay, remember shooting down the Russian warplane? That cost him a lot. Okay, in prestige, and he had to come back basically, hat in hand to get to cool down the situation with the Russians. So he has this propensity to lash out, but and as Alexander McCure has rightly put, ever since the attempted coup and the quote unquote restructuring of the Turkish military, they're not too keen on this here. Okay, it could blow up in his face.
Absolutely.
Alexander, you want to jump in?
Just very quickly, I mean, what Peter was saying about Assad not wanting a war with Turkey is absolutely right. Assad's policy before 2011 was friendship with Turkey. He and Erdogan, it sounds incredible to say this now, he and Erdogan were actually close friends. And if we come back to Erdogan, Erdogan has repeatedly shown that he's tactically clever and strategically extremely unwise. What happened in 2011 is that he had a good relationship with the Syrian government and with Bashar al-Assad. He should also have realized that Bashar al-Assad was holding Syria together. It is not in Turkey's interest to have Syria broken up. And
Kurd problem again.
Exactly, and what Peter's exactly right. I mean, this is exactly where it comes from. I mean, the only reason why we're even talking about Kurdish statelets in Syria at all is because of this war in Syria, which Erdogan himself facilitated. Now, his correct policy in 2011 would have been to work with Assad to try to contain the crisis in Syria. He has saved himself and Turkey a huge amount of trouble if he'd done that. Instead, he helped the jihadi insurgency against Syria, and he's now created the problems in Syria which he is facing. Now, I have to say this. I mean, we've talked about the unwisdom, the great unwisdom for the United States remaining in northeast Syria. I think Erdogan is making a big mistake by sending the Turkish army into Syria. I think sooner or later, the local people will want to see it go. The only army that belongs in northeast Syria, the only army that can defeat ISIS, control the Kurds, provide Turkey itself with the security it is entitled to on its southern border is the Syrian army. Turkey's interests, its true long-range interests, are in the restoration of the Syrian state and the development of a friendly relationship between Turkey and Syria, such as existed before 2011. Now, whether Erdogan will ever understand that or will ever come to that, I really don't know. But as I said, this operation which he's launching, I can understand the motivations for it. As I said, it is not such a radical departure from Turkish policy, but in the end, it's not going to work out well.
Yeah, the thing is that no matter how you cut it, no matter how deep the Turks go in to Syria, they will be deemed as occupiers.
Yes.
Now, one thing that we've learned since 2011, the Kurds are tenacious people. They're fighters. They carried water. They fought ISIS. They really did. Of course, they did have American help, but I don't think that's the difference, okay? No. Because they believed the Americans would give them what they wanted, which the Americans can't, okay? It can't give them what they want. You can give them money, you can give them war material, but you can't give them a state. You know, that's just a bridge too far.
Yes.
And so now, I mean, what I've been told is that Erdogan, his plan is to repopulate these areas. Okay, I mean, we're talking about ethnic cleansing of one form or another. That ain't gonna go down well, folks. Okay, and the Turks will not be wanted. Okay, again, and I don't want to sound paradoxical or confusing here, but I'm agreeing absolutely with Alexander Mikiris. From Ankar's point of view, I understand what they want to achieve in northern Syria when it comes to the Kurds. I understand that. But if it's not thought out well, and Alexander Mikiris is absolutely right, they strategically blunder all of the time, Erdogan's government. But they better have it thought out, because they're not going to resolve any problems if they think they're just going to go sit there. That's not going to be accepted by the local population. And Assad knows that. And you know what? He's been waiting since 2011. This is a long, long journey. And so, you know, it was Aleppo. Now it's next going to be Idlib. You know, it's a slow war of attrition. But they have the wind to their back. All right, they have the wind to their back. And with the Arab League re-inviting slowly but surely Assad back into their ranks, we have a new normal now. Okay. What's abnormal is, why is the United States in Syria at all? Okay, it needs to be the Arabs, the Turks, the region need to resolve this, not foreign occupation or countries occupying others, meaning Turkey occupying part of Syria. It's not the solution.
All right, before we get to the super chats, a thank you to Cheryl for sharing the people that are viewing this live stream. Thank you very much, Cheryl, for those updates. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to hit that like button, everybody, and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. You can also go to the Duran shop and pick up some great merchandise, like that shirt Alexander is wearing and the Lavrov mug that he has. And so before we get to the super chats, Alexander, Peter, really quick, do you guys want to sound off on how the media is covering the Kurds? Any final comments there? Stupid, simplistic. Obviously, they're using it against Trump to hit Trump
moronic
with it. Moronic.
I mean, all those things, all those words are correct.
Just yeah, go off on them, because I watch it and it infuriates me.
But dishonest also, because as I said, it's not really about the Kurds at all. I mean, people like, you know, all these people who are writing now, sounding off about the Kurds, they've never been interested in the Kurds up to now. They are obsessed still with Assad. This is the idée fixe that they have. They want to find some means of getting back at Assad. They're even more angry with Assad.
How could we have lost? How could we have lost?
Exactly. So now they've discovered this new great cause, which is the Kurds. Before it was the Sunni Muslims in Syria. Now it's the Kurds. So we know we migrate to have to champion the Kurds. The fact that, as I said, this is a battle lost because the United States cannot help the Kurds, and that it's also antagonizing Turkey, which, as Peter says, is a key NATO ally. It's got the second biggest army in NATO, after the United States. I'm not suggesting that it's comparable to, say, the British or French armies, but it's big. And of course, it is strategically important. It's not a country you should just, heedlessly antagonize in pursuit of some misconceived and quixotic quest to overthrow the Syrian government, which will only bring even more disaster in its wake. But that's how they are, and they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about Assad. They don't want, because they know that the American people are absolutely tired of all of this, and they will not support the continued presence of US troops in Syria. Some kind of campaign against that.
I mean, the US could, it could do something, I suppose, for the Kurds, but at what cost? Yeah. And at what time frame are we talking about? 18 years, like in Afghanistan? What has that achieved? Nothing. All right. I mean, they could do it, but the costs are so formidable. I mean, I think it's really interesting, again, from the media class and the foreign policy blog. No one says obvious things. So Turkey illegally invades Cyprus and annex half the island. Now they're invading illegally another country, and no one says this, you know? I mean, this is how they think, okay? I mean, as I've always stressed here, is that Western media is completely oblivious to international law, but at the same time, the West is always saying that everyone should be abide by international norms. Well, who's breaking these norms left and right and center, and no one points it out?
You know, I think God, the Ukraine and Syria stories are so similar, Peter Alexander, from the media perspective, in that they're drudging up these stories again. You know, Syria kind of died down for a year or two. Ukraine, obviously, for a good 4 or 5 years, died down. And now they're bringing them back up. And I think you've said it many times, Peter, that these places are so corrupt. There's so much dirt. There was so much stealing. So many bad things were happening. A lot of it on the deep state Democrat side, a lot of it on the Republican side. But now they're bringing it back up. And here we are, all of us, talking about it again. Now with Syria, you know, a week ago with Maidan and Biden and Hunter Biden and everything that went on. I mean, it's like they're, you know, they want us to expose all their corrupt lies and stealing and war and theft.
But what's really interesting, again, if we want to look at Syria and Ukraine, what is their historical frame? It's very, very narrow, isn't it? I mean, it's, oh my goodness, Ukraine's in the news because of one telephone call that was quote unquote taken down by a secondhand whistleblower. Okay, I mean their memory only goes back about 2 weeks. Okay, they don't go back to the spring of 2014 with the illegal overthrow of a democratically elected government. And the same thing with Syria. They don't talk about how the U.S. and its regional allies funded jihadists, you know, enormous sums of money. Enormous sums of money. They created a unbelievable migration crisis for Europe. Okay, basically, it basically ended Merkel's legacy because of immigration. Okay, but no, it's just they suddenly realized there were Kurdish people there. Okay, I mean, you know, they just go back a couple of weeks. You know, that's the whole history here. And that's what I find so very frustrating, because we take the long view of all these stories. They never seem to be able to connect any dots. I mean, I think I sent you a message when Trump finished his call with Erdogan. I guess that's going to be leaked soon. You know, I watched Hannity and Laura on Fox. They stayed away from it completely, like it didn't even happen. And then what does Tucker Carlson do? First 10 minutes of his program, boom, boom, boom. He hammered away at it, okay? The only guy to have courage, the only guy to look into the bigger picture of things. Though I have to say, he didn't mention the coup of 2014.
No one mentions it, Alexander. And we've also mentioned, and there's some people in the chat talking about it, and you've said it many times, the next shoe to drop is MH17. But we're discussing everything now. We do go back to the history of how all these things happened, whether it's Ukraine or Syria. I mean, we're not letting go now because they've brought it back up again.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to express any theories about MH17 because I don't think the facts are there. All I'm going to say is...
But it's going to come up again sooner or later.
It's going to come up again because that investigation, I mean, I know a bit about investigations. That investigation is not an investigation.
Shambles.
It's basically putting together a number of press releases and combining it with some obviously fake photos and some equally obviously faked radio intercepts or supposed radio intercepts.
Yeah. And social media. And social
media messages. I mean, a true investigation which goes to the area, looks at all the logs of all the various military units involved, goes through all the various communications that happened, checked all the radar signals, does all of those things, hasn't happened. There hasn't actually been a proper investigation. They haven't asked to speak to any of the real people involved. Now, why? Why? Well, clearly there is something about this story that is very, very embarrassing. And I'm sure that is true about MH17. It's got to be true about lots of other things also. So the result is that yes, I think we are eventually going to get into all kinds of interesting situations with MH17, but that's only going to be the the start of it. I mean, what about the snipers on Maidan Square?
Right. Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but we actually pretty much know everything there. But then that moment has passed. Okay, what is it? John Kerry. Hours after MH17 was shot down, it was on the Sunday shows, and he just pointed a finger. It was done. The guilty party was found without any investigation whatsoever.
Yes.
At all. I want to go to the conversation that Trump had with Zelensky because I think it's really interesting, and our viewers should take a look at the transcript and the meeting that Trump had with Zelensky on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. See Zelensky, see how he behaves. He is kowtowing because that's what has happened to the Ukrainian elites. They are dependent now. And you know what? In all fairness to Zelensky, he's still early days in his administration. I truly believe, I'll take him at his word, he wants to clean up corruption, but he knows he can't clean up corruption in his own country. I think he actually really wants Trump to have people from the FBI, as tainted as they are, maybe, I don't know, it's the 9th floor or the 10th floor, they're the corrupt bad apples, but have some investigators come over and take a look at what's really going on in Ukraine and help him out. Okay, I take him at his word. I think he wants to fight corruption, and he needs. If Donald Trump can say, "Look, I'm going to help you. I'm going to have your back on the Normandy talks," we can let him down easy, but I'll be there. I'll be your chaperone. You need to take that big step. You need to talk to the Russians because you know what? And if I'm speaking as Donald Trump, I don't want to have anything to do with your country. Nice people, good country, but I got other things to worry about. Okay? He can help facilitate that. But because of the illegal overthrow of the government in 2014, you have a government that doesn't have stability, doesn't have the ability to act as a actor on its own. It's always weighed down by the horrific corruption that has only gotten worse in Ukraine. Maidan has brought nothing good to the Ukrainian people at all, all right? And I think Zelensky, I'm going to take him at his word. I've already said that. He needs help to do that. I think he sees Donald Trump might be able to help him out a little bit on this, okay? And having Trump, again, since we're on it, sorry, but I read the transcript, okay? It was clumsy, and it's pure, it's authentic, vintage Trump. It wanders around a lot, okay? It's not very focused, okay? But I think it's very fair that Trump wants to know the origins of Russiagate. I think of all people in the world, don't you think he has the right to know how they hatched this against him? All right. Again, I think it was sloppy. I think there was some inappropriateness. And I just kind of bite my tongue and like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. Okay. Nothing illegal. Inappropriate? Yeah. But we got used to that. Okay. We got used to that with this president here. So Trump is going to skate on this one. This is so ridiculous. It's so childish. Okay. Yes. And it's really a distraction because if Nancy Pelosi won't call a vote of the House of Representatives to proceed with impeachment, there is no impeachment. Okay. They're treading water. They're chewing up. They're trying to take all the oxygen out of the media cycles. Okay. That's all they're trying to do. And that's all they can do. That's all they can do. And this is such a disservice, okay? I mean, this is just trying to get another bite at the apple. I mean, you'd think, rational adults, it's like, it didn't work the last time. We really don't need to do this again. And this time, as a friend of mine pointed it out, and I think I said it on Crosstalk on Sunday, on our Sunday recording. In Russiagate, there wasn't much Russia in it. But in Ukrainegate, there's a lot of Ukraine in it, okay? They bet that so many more people are going to be exposed, okay? Because the carpetbaggers were there in force and they were there fast, right after the Maidan illegal coup, okay? They were there fast. And we know, do you trust criminals? I don't. These people will turn on a dime. They'll say, oh yeah, I did that with him and I gave him money and I gave him that information because they want to please you, okay? They see who has the power right now. Because Hillary was supposed to win, right?
Supposed to win, and she may be running again. We'll get into that. We'll get into that as well. But Alexander, Trey Gowdy is now going to be on Trump's team.
Well, that's
what
what
out today.
That's
We were waiting, I guess, for more clarity as to the second whistleblower, which to me, Alexander, before you jump into this, I don't think it means anything because we already have the transcript. We already have all the information that's out there. So now we're going to hear from what? The guy that the first whistleblower.
No, but the whistleblower, the second whistleblower is the guy that gave him the.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's completely meaningless. This seems like a deep state kind of trick that they're playing right now. But Alexander, comment on these.
What is happening? It's actually a form of news management. You don't have a case here. I mean, I read the transcript. Peter's read the transcript. You've read the transcript. Many of our viewers have. I mean, Peter says there was some inappropriate language. Well, maybe there was, but I mean,
not illegal.
Not illegal. Very, very borderline. At the end of the day, we must remember this was supposed to be a one-to-one call between two presidents. This is not a structured discussion. The purpose of the call actually was for Trump to congratulate Zelensky on his party's victory in the parliamentary elections. And then they talked about certain things, and Trump talked about the fact that he wants Ukraine's help with the investigation, William Barr's investigation, the Justice Department's investigation into the origins of Russiagate and the way in which all this mess arose during the 2016 election. A perfectly valid and proper thing. So you don't have a case. So what do you do in order to conceal the fact that you don't have a case, but to keep the story going? You move things around all the time. First of all, you don't have a house. You don't have a House vote. So it's debatable whether there's even an impeachment inquiry actually going on at all in any true sense. You then construct news. So firstly, you have the one whistleblower, then you have the other second whistleblower, which is really a no story. I mean, it's a non-story. The second whistleblower cannot tell us anything that we don't already know because
we have the transcript.
We've got the transcript. So, you keep this thing going. Now, I mean, we had another story today in the New York Times, a really bizarre one about how somebody who listened into this conversation, a CIA official, was shocked by all,
CIA shocked
by all these terrible things that Donald Trump allegedly was saying. Now, that may have been the second whistleblower, or it may have been some other person. We don't know, but and then shocking. So it's really shocking, and then of course we go to the actual transcript itself, and we look around to find what the shocking stuff is, and there doesn't really seem to be anything.
And it's Mike Pompeo said we lie, cheat, and steal, and they're shocked.
Exactly. So I mean, they're generating news. They're trying to keep ahead of the story because the one thing they do not want to do, and this is why they're going to be very worried about the fact that a forensically minded lawyer like Trey Gowdy is now coming in. What they really don't want somebody to do is to do what Gowdy so effectively did during Russiagate, which is actually look at the documents in question and unpack them, analyze them, look for the actual meat in them. What do the documents in fact say? That's the one thing they don't want to do. That's what he is going to do, because that's the one thing I've realized about Trey Gowdy is one thing he does incredibly well. This is a man who understands and analyzes documents properly and brings them out and makes them clear. They don't want us to look at the facts. So rather than have us look at the facts, rather than have people like Trey Gowdy look at the facts, they're trying to keep the story going by, as I said, generating all these things, even fictitious things like
but who would have thought? That the initial stage of impeachment would come from the intelligence committees?
Well,
it should come from the judicial committees. Okay. I mean, this is really bizarre. And you have that psychopath for Pinocchios, Adam Schiff, running the show right now, who has
Didn't they try Peter with Nadler? Can you make the argument that they tried with Nadler? So Pelosi said, you know what, Nadler's a dud.
No, Nancy told Nadler he can go home and take a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So she put all her trust. I guess you could say, maybe. Yeah.
Well, you could see her dentures rolling in her mouth on that one. Oh, that was a big mistake.
They literally were rolling in her mouth, literally.
No, but Alexander Maciris is right. I mean, this is not a real impeachment process. This is an impeachment media show. This is what it is. Okay. That's what they want. Okay. Because they're feeding their base. Something is being done. Okay. Because there's nothing, you can't move forward with this here. And the reason why Nancy's doing this is really obvious. She doesn't want to call a vote because they're 20 to 40, I forget the number, congressional districts that Trump won in 2016 that at this point in time have Democratic representatives. And that small number, 20 to 40, they will be terrified to go against the party initiative for impeachment. So she wants to spare them that, okay? And also, these are same people, you know, if they do not do it, then the AOC squad will come and primary them, okay? So Nancy's got her hands full with a whole lot of problems because she doesn't have a case. She just doesn't have a case. And mark my words, the more they push this, the more corruption that's going to be revealed in Ukraine, and it's going to hit a lot of people, not just Republicans. It's going to hit Democrats. It's going to hit everybody, okay? Because it was a feeding trough, a veritable feeding trough, and a lot of people are not sleeping well at night now because it could come out. They never thought. In a corrupt regime, you think you can get away with anything. That's a very mission of corruption. But now it is political ammo. So there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable people here. Nancy, be careful what you wish for, okay? Mm-hmm. We got Bob Barr and Trey Gowdy on the case. Got best news of the day.
Alexander, can I throw out a theory to you? Maybe this is a long shot, but okay, everyone's talking about Hillary Clinton jumping back in the race now. And we've been talking about this for a year now. I mean, it's been floating around, but now things are really heating up. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it. Even Fox News, even Tucker Carlson has brought it up a couple of times as well. So, I mean, this is getting into the mainstream now that she's going to be running again. Adam Schiff knew about the whistleblower in August. He spoke to him, he knew about it. John Kerry and his son, Christopher Hines, his son-in-law, or his stepson, sorry. He disassociated from the Bidens about a month and a half ago, very publicly too. They disassociate from Biden. Obama fails to endorse Biden now for, the better part of a year, just doesn't do it. I mean, he's radio silence, Obama.
You don't have to do this, Joe.
Yeah, was this in the making, all of this, in order to lead up to Hillary coming back in? In other words, did they say, you know what, we'll run Biden, we'll run Warren and all these people. We'll see how they do. We see that Biden is flaking. Throw him under the bus. We'll release this Ukraine stuff. And Hillary will make her grand appearance come end of October. What do you think? Because it seems like everyone knew about this a couple of months before.
Yeah.
And Obama's been totally silent.
Yes.
On all of this. And he knows exactly what's going on in all these areas.
Yes. I have to say, I think even the DNC must understand at some level that Hillary Clinton is such damaged goods.
Yeah, toxic.
That to see it as some kind of a big plot to leverage her back into the race, when the only outcome of that is going to be another Trump victory with an even bigger margin. I can't quite believe that. But I'm going to say something. Hillary Clinton, of course, she probably does have strings that she's pulling. I mean, she most definitely does want to be back in the race. I mean, I've been following her.
She wants to run.
She wants to run. I don't any question about it. I mean, listening to her recently, and she's all over the place for one thing. I mean, you see her all the time now. I mean, and she's commenting and she's tweeting, and it's quite obvious to me that, she's saying to herself, well, it can't be Joe, because Joe Biden is, going to go down in flames before very long. I mean, he's already sinking. And Elizabeth Warren is just too left wing for many people. So, here is my third chance, I should say, my third chance. But I mean, what if that is true? What a disastrous idea. I mean, the State Department is once again looking into the scandal about a private server. We have the question of the origins of Russiagate and the way in which the Clinton campaign was involved in cooking all of that up with Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS and all of that. Do we really want to see this extremely unpopular person brought back in? All it's going to do if they do that is remind a lot of Americans of why they voted for Trump in the first place.
No, I think it's really interesting. I mean, there's so many different angles from it's a fascinating story. I think the prospect, not the reality, but the prospect of another Hillary Clinton run is being concocted by members of the DNC to, number one, knock Joe out. Mm-hmm. Number one, knock Joe out. Number two, the prospect of Hillary Clinton, and then move to the left. I think because they see their base as being leftist, and I think that they think it's a change election, the visceral hatred of Trump. I think this is at this stage, I think it's still a cover. And I think it's a way to maneuver Joe out, because he's an establishment guy. I mean, he's done really well in politics, if you know what I mean, and his son. I'm not convinced of it. I think this is more of a ploy. I think it's a ploy for some members of the DNC to say, do you really want Joe because he's like Hillary, and you really want Hillary again? Do we want to go through this again? And we will know far more about the origins of Russiagate and Hillary Clinton's involvement and the DNC's involvement that cannot make her look good. Okay, so the prospect is real. Is the reality real? I don't think so. Not at this point. Okay. I mean, just minutes before we did this podcast, someone sent me a Breitbart article, and she's on the recording. She says, "I'll run against them and beat him again." I mean, beat him again, Hillary? Are you with us? Are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Beat him again.
Beat him again. Are you with us? Okay. So no, she's damaged goods. I mean, the problem is that the corruption of the Clintons is long and legendary, okay? And they still have some claws in the DNC. But I think there's enough people in the DNC too that want to really move to the left, okay? And I think that there's more and more people that are going to back Elizabeth Warren, even though with her ridiculous stories. But I don't think the stories are going to resonate with her supporters. And this is the time that we live in now. I said on my crosstalk recording yesterday, Trump speaks Trump speak, and his base understands Trump speak. It's embellished, it's exaggerated, it's boisterous. All of those pinheads at MSNBC, they're looking at every single word and kind of sparse it not. But Trump supporters knows what he's saying. And I think for Elizabeth Warren, if you attack her on that pregnancy story, you're just going to turn off urban, suburban women. I don't see a point going down that path. No. Would Trump do it? Well, probably, but I don't think that's wise to do that. And to be fair, I try to be very magnanimous. She walked away from the Pocahontas thing, okay? She screwed up on that. But if you look she's a very powerful speaker. She's getting a lot of big crowds, okay? I think she's very viable, and I think the DNC sees that, okay? So, Alex Christopher, we're going to be talking about this until it happens or doesn't happen. But I mean, the prospect of Hillary getting back in the pack, then the DNC is in really big trouble. And you know what it will do? It will, like Trump is a destabilizing effect within the GOP because there's still a lot of never-Trumper Republicans. Hillary Clinton will break the back of the Democratic Party if she tries too hard to get back in, because I know plenty of people to this day, they are just as furious now as they were when Hillary stole the primary from Bernie. 3 years in, they're still really, really angry about that. Okay, Hillary is not going to be, it's not going to be a coronation like she thinks it might be. No way. things have changed, and the progressive hold on the party is a lot tighter now, a lot tighter. So it's a fascinating story. I think it can go in a number of different directions, but my gut here, as we speak right now, no, she won't run.
All right, let's get to some super chats. But Alexandra, they did know about the transcripts, did they not? I mean, Kerry disassociating from Biden, Obama not endorsing Biden, Schiff in August. No, they knew this was going to drop.
But don't you think this is really not about Hillary Clinton? It's about getting rid.
Yeah, maybe it's not. Maybe my
And
angle on Hillary Clinton is not correct, but they definitely knew about this in advance.
I think so. I obviously think that's the case here, and I think that again, the party is conspiring against one of its leading or most recently leading contenders here. This is all an inter-Democratic Party intrigue.
Alexander,
I agree with that entirely. I mean, I think it was obvious already that Joe Biden was not going to win the presidency for the Democratic Party, and I think already there was plans for some time to find some way to leverage him out, given the fact that he wasn't apparently prepared to bow out. So he's caught in the crossfire here. Between the Democrats and Trump, but as far as the Democrats are concerned, well, he's expendable. I mean, they're happy.
I think Obama told him not to run as well. I mean, I think Obama explicitly told him, "Don't run."
It's a 2-for-1. It's a 2-for-1. Get rid of Trump and Biden. It's a 2-for-1 deal. Yeah. This is what they're angling. They want to get rid of Biden, and getting rid of Biden is a way to attack Trump. That's their strategy.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right, let's get to the super chats now, guys. From Valley S, $20 super chat. Thank you, Valley S, for that super chat. We really appreciate it. From Baukjan Dauma, super chat. Pompeo has gone AWOL. Have you guys heard anything from Pompeo outside of his trip to Italy that he also took out the bar? I think Pompeo was. Didn't Pompeo also go to Italy, and then he was in Greece? I know he was in Greece a couple of days ago.
I didn't hear about it, Italy, but I mean, Pompeo is just what he's just doing is licking Trump's boots. He does it in a really kind of disgusting way. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, I do agree with Pompeo's statement that at least his State Department people are not going to cooperate with Congress on this investigation on impeachment, because if there's no call for impeachment, why are these people going to be hauled in front of committees? No, you have to call a vote, and then we take it from there.
Alexander, do you know if Pompeo was in Italy or not? I think he was. Maybe the chat can tell us if he was there as well.
As I understand it, I think he was. I mean, he's obviously doing the work. I mean, that is partly the work of a Secretary of State. I mean, he is quite active in all of this. But I mean, to come back to what Peter was saying, I mean, not only is Pompeo saying that. By the way, can I just make a point? What was sent by the Democrats to Pompeo and to the State Department, as I understand it, were not anyway even proper subpoenas. They were simply letters. They didn't actually issue subpoenas, because if they'd issued subpoenas, that might have led to a legal challenge, a court challenge, on the validity of those subpoenas, at which point the people on the receiving end in the State Department could have come along and said, well, to the court, why are we being landed with these subpoenas when there isn't even a proper House-endorsed impeachment inquiry? Now, I understand that subsequently, Democratic Party chairmen have issued subpoenas of other people, but this just shows how chaotic this so-called impeachment inquiry is. And what Peter was saying, that Pompeo is resisting this inquiry, it's now actually the official policy of the Trump administration. They're saying we're not cooperating with this. As far as we are concerned, there is no proper impeachment inquiry, and there cannot be until there is a vote by the House.
I think it was interesting that Pompeo went to Greece right before this Turkey thing came up. I wonder if he was shoring up some support.
I have no doubt of it. I've no doubt of it. I mean, if we can just return to this issue, I mean, as I understand it, what's been happening over the last 2 years or so is that as Turkey has drifted closer to Russia, the US has been working to bring Greece and Cyprus more into its fold, and has been succeeding in doing so.
Yeah, Jeffrey Piat's there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Jeffrey
yes,
Piat,
ambassador, yeah.
exactly.
And the new president is very pro. I mean, Mitsotakis is pro.
Very,
in a
very
big
pro.
way.
Exactly. So as I said, this is now the plan. So where, you know, traditionally Greece has had good relations with Russia and Turkey's had bad relations with Russia, we now see a kind of reversal of the position.
Yeah, good point. Super chat from Penguins fan. Peter, what should Russia do if Turkey enters Syria?
Well, they're going to work with consultations with the Damascus government and see where they can take it from there. Assad doesn't want to fight the Turks, but I mean, he's going to have to draw the line, and the Russians are going to have a say in it as well. I mean, and that's the unique situation that Russia has, is that it can talk to Damascus and to Ankara, and they can probably, and I'm pretty sure they will try to make sure that things don't get out of control. Again, you know, I want to stress here to everyone, you know, I understand Turkey's attitude towards the Kurds, okay? And it's in many ways, it's their fault, the way they've treated them inside of Turkey, and basically having kind of a historical blackout about the history of the Kurds and their situation there, and having revisionist forces on your border. I understand that. What I don't understand, what I do understand, but I don't agree with, is how Erdogan is dealing with that. He should deal with the Damascus. If he wants to deal with the Kurds, he has to deal with Damascus. And that's when he's going to get some results. And the Russians are going to nudge him in that direction.
Yeah. Can I just say, I mean, I understand that this guy, Lavrov, has actually been busy, active today on this. And apparently he's spoken to the Turkish foreign minister. And the Turkish foreign minister has given an assurance on behalf of Erdogan that Turkey continues to respect Syria's territorial integrity. Now, obviously, what Erdogan says may not necessarily correspond with what he thinks or what he does, but it's important to say that these kind of statements are not without value, because you can bank them and play them back to the giver of those statements later. So that's classic diplomacy. So the Russians are talking to the Turks. They're obviously doing what Peter said, they're talking to the Syrians. They've also managed, with the Turks and with the Iranians and with the Syrians, to cobble together finally a Syrian constitutional committee, which is supposed to draw up a new constitution for Syria. And so that's the way they're going to go. They can't stop the Turks going into northeast Syria. They don't even have a presence there. They've redeployed some of their troops apparently to Aleppo, just in case anybody in Turkey has any ideas. And there's apparently been a deployment of Russian military police south of Afrin province, which is this other Turkish occupied area of Syria. Again, I suspect more as a kind of tripwire, just in case anybody in Turkey gets too many ideas. But ultimately, at this point, they will engage with the Turks and with the Syrians diplomatically, both to contain this thing and also in the long run to pave the way for an all-Syria settlement, possibly through this constitutional committee, which will involve the withdrawal of Turkish troops from Syria. I think the Russians feel that they can handle the Turks.
Yeah.
I mean, handling the US is much more difficult, obviously, because the US is so much more powerful and so much more unpredictable in some ways. But I think when it comes to the Turks, the Russians believe, and I think they're right, that they can handle them, that they can manage them.
All right, Alexander, super chat from Penguins fan. Update on Idlib, Syria.
More advances. Apparently, the Syrian army has been quietly pushing forward, as I understand.
As you predicted.
Indeed. And of course, I mean, you could argue that the Turks redeploying to northeast Syria actually reduces the Turkish pressure in Idlib, and that the Syrian army is now taking advantage of that. So obviously, this is a very complicated and intricate game in which there are many different players. But I think Peter got it exactly right. The Syrians have the wind at their backs. they are the people who are ultimately getting the momentum, and they're winning in Idlib, and before very long they will win in northeast Syria also. These latest developments, to be very clear about this, in the long term, I'm confident of this, will play in Syria's favor. If the Americans leave northeast Syria, sooner or later, it will be the Syrian army that will go back in there. The Kurds will want it to go back in there because it will want the Syrian army to protect them from the Turks. They're already talking in that way. And the Turks would rather the Syrian army was there than that the Kurds, a Kurdish military state that was there. So there has to be quite a lot of negotiation, quite a lot of diplomacy, but ultimately, in the long term, the pieces are falling in Syria's favor. And the Syrians are good diplomats. The Russians who are working with them are outstanding ones. I mean, they know how to play this game, and they will play it well.
All right, super chat from Christian Kohler, 40 CHF for clear and no fake news. Thank you for that super chat, Christian. From Penguins fan, Peter, super chat. What will Macron do if the US pulls out from Syria?
Mm-hmm. Well, nothing. I mean, what can he?
Go ahead, Alexander.
I mean, well, France is not a great power. I mean, he can give more speeches about the betrayal of the Kurds or the importance of engaging with Russia. But I mean, other than that, I mean, he has no.
Well, look. If the U.S. withdraws from all of Syria and the French stay there in some way, everyone will just ignore them. So nothing. Okay, like, who are you? What are you doing here?
All right, super chat from Toilet Sauce, 20 euros. Peter, fascists are protesting against Zelensky adhering to the Minsk agreements. Will we see finally what Zelensky is made of? Also, Ukraine only exists as a sovereign state because Russia recognizes it as such. Change my mind.
Well, Ukrainians will really target me for this one. I mean, Ukraine is kind of an artificial state, more than most states anyway. That's the whole problem with the Donbass, because Poroshenko promised it, but he didn't fulfill his promise. I mean, very quickly into his administration, is that if you give autonomy and regional particularities to like the Donbass, every other region in Ukraine will ask for the same thing. Every single one of them. Now, going back with these fascist thugs, that's why Zelensky is playing nice with Trump, because Zelensky has to play a Trump card, as it were. And it's the Normandy format, which I think is a complete waste of time up until now, okay? Because that way, the United States, Donald Trump's representative, can be in the room at the table, and Zelensky can make his proposal, and he can look it to the United States. I hope he doesn't hope for too much, but just something that will give him the political weight and wherewithal to make a bold move, to start talks to end the conflict there. And that's what the Russians want. Absolutely, they want that, okay? But somebody has to break the ice here. Zelensky was voted in on an anti-corruption platform and a platform of reaching out to Russia. That's what he was elected for. 70-something% voted for him to do that. He needs a bold move to show that he's good to his word. And I think that Donald Trump, like I said earlier, Donald Trump will give him that backing, because Donald Trump doesn't care about Ukraine, okay? No. If that's what you need, okay, fine. Yeah, I mean, I hate to put it a parallel, but, Netanyahu, so we recognize the Golan Heights as Israel? Yeah, why not? I mean, but I don't care. He doesn't care. Again, it doesn't mean anything to him, okay? And so, if that's what it's going to take, that's why Zelensky was playing nice when they were at the United Nations. He needs help. And you know what? They overthrew the Ukrainian government. The least the U.S. government can do now is help this guy. I want to see Zelensky succeed. I want to see Ukraine succeed. Because if Ukraine succeeds, everyone does in the entire neighborhood. Okay? rethinking Ukraine rethinking its relationship with Russia would be the wisest thing it possibly could do. And Trump could help that.
All right. Super chat from David, $2. Thank you, David, for that super chat. Alexander, a super chat from Penguins fan. Is Putin and Erdogan talking on Syria right now?
I haven't heard, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Be surprised, yeah.
And I'm going to make a guess, if they haven't talked already, they will talk very, very soon. I mean, Putin and Erdogan talk very, very often. I think that if you go onto Putin's website, which, by the way, I strongly recommend anybody who's interested in Russian politics to do. It is the single most informative website of any world leader. I mean, and it gives you an idea of how hard that man works, but that's another story. But if you go to that website and you count up the number of people Putin speaks to, I mean, Erdogan is just off the scale. They are always talking to each other on a regular basis. I mean, they usually talk at least once a month, and more often, a lot more often than that. Most months more often than that. So if they haven't spoken already, I'm sure that they will do so.
Well, I'm sure that they're going to have a number of conversations because Erdogan is scheduled to show up in Washington soon to meet Trump.
No,
that's right. Super chat from Lee Vanderheiden. $5 Canadian. Thank you, Lee, for that super chat. Peter from Penguins fan, super chat. I hope the Syrian government takes over all territory so I can see the faces of Kerry and Obama for their failures. What do you think?
I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, don't you remember, it wasn't long, see, we have memories here. We have long memories, I don't know, Alexander McCurris, was it in Geneva or one of these talks, ceasefire talks and all that? And John Kerry, Secretary of State, is caught on a hot mic, even admitting, U.S. is in Syria illegally. We're not there. We're not supposed to be there. The Russians were invited. Damascus asked them to come. There was a hot mic. Of course, the mainstream ignores it, but a lot of people that really follow these things did report it, like we did.
Exactly.
These people should be named and shamed.
Yeah.
For this whole crisis since 2011 is artificial, turned into an international proxy war, and the Syrian people have suffered enough. Okay, and the gall of the U.S. Sanctioning anyone that wants to help the Syrian government rebuild. Do you know that they will go after you if you want to help rebuild the country?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why China is probably going to be the winner in it all, because they don't care about American sanctions. Okay, so the Chinese go to, and like they do all around the world, is build infrastructure madness. That's what it is, and they'll do it for Syria, and Russia will help too.
Yeah.
All right, Alexander, super chat from Penguins fan. Another carpetbaggers, the Klitschko brothers.
Well, indeed, absolutely.
You haven't heard from them in a while.
No, as I understand it, I mean, he's been trying to cling on. I forget the name of the first name of which one, but he's been trying to cling on as this is the cling on in Kiev. But there we go. Carpetbaggers describes them exactly. That is exactly what they are.
Yeah.
All right. Like Saakashvili. What's he up to lately?
Yeah, where did he go?
I think he's learning Spanish because he's going to take over for random guy Guaido in Venezuela. It's like he's working on his Spanish now.
All right, super chat from Saint Longinus Peter. Reports of the UN budget being hundreds of millions of dollars in the red. What does this portend for the future?
More corruption at the UN. I mean, that's a storied phenomena at the United Nations. Which, I know I've disappointed Alexander McCurris and I've disappointed some of our viewers here. I mean, I'd like to see the United Nations function more efficiently. Yes. And I'd like to see it. And some of the things it does, I think, are good. Okay. And it does give very small, poor countries a venue to speak out on a world stage, which I think is also good. Yeah. But, when there's so much temptation there, they line your pockets, and it just really undermines the institution. Okay, and needs to be streamlined. It has to be lean and mean, but it won't ever be because too many people line their pockets with other people's money, and that's just the storied career of the United Nations.
I think that's absolutely right. Well, I mean, one of the great problems that has happened with the United Nations is that after the end of the Cold War, its secretariat, its administrative bodies were basically captured by the United States. And they continue to be. So you get all kinds of people within the UN system in sort of regional areas in Africa or whatever it is, doing relief, and a lot of that work is very good and very well done. But if you actually look at people in New York, the actual secretariat, they are unfortunately all too often now an echo chamber of the State Department and of the State Department's positions. And that means that with the US becoming increasingly reluctant to fund international organizations such as the UN, hello, it's becoming other countries are reluctant to step in and provide it with more funding, because from their point of view, why should they fund an organization that is no longer impartial and neutral, as it once did generally aspire to be?
All right, Alexander, super chat from Penguins fan. What happened to liberals, especially in Syria? They are cheering for jihadists and Kurds. Example, Democracy Now!, Intercept, TYT. And
I know.
It's unbelievable because, of course, if you follow British history well, as I do, I mean, obviously, in the 19th century, to the extent that there were criticisms of British imperialism in Britain, they tended to come from people who were liberals. One of the most powerful anti-imperialist speeches ever made in the British House of Commons was by the Liberal MP, John Bright, who spoke out against the Crimean War and spoke of the angel of death hovering over the country because of all these people dying in war. And now to see liberals today being so intolerant, trying to censor people and bomb people and supporting carpetbaggers that go into places, I'm sorry to dwell on this. I mean, it is such an extraordinary reversal of what they used to stand for.
Yeah.
But that is liberalism today.
Yeah, because
they've
been captured by the deep state.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, they're the new spokespeople of the deep state.
Yes,
and their tentacles all through mainstream media. They walk in lockstep now. Okay, and it's all ideologically driven. Has nothing to do with facts. I mean, we could talk until we're all blue in the face, and our viewers are blue in the face about all of the contradictions of what they have believed and what they continue to believe. It is so completely divorced from reality.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened to Democracy Now! Okay, the TYT,
I don't
whatever, that's fine. But the Intercept is an interesting one, don't you guys think? I mean,
it's a hybrid, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, because you have Glenn Greenwald, which excellent stuff. Jeremy, I'm not sure how I pronounce his last name.
I think Cahill. Is that?
No, Shehel, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean they're great at it, and I even mentioned here. There's an article on the Intercept because I'm doing a program on Syria tomorrow. The 8 times in the last 100 years that the Kurds have been abandoned. It's on their website as I speak right now. Okay, but then you have a lot of weird writers. I mean, which of course. I'm a speed reader. I just go, I cherry pick my way through because a lot of it, some of it just garbage. I mean, they had a pro-Russiagate conspiracy theorist over there for the longest time. I guess whoever his name is, he's still there. So, I mean, from what I understand, and I may be wrong about this, but Glenn Greenwald was one of the founders of Intercept, but he's been sidelined to the point where he's an editor and he can write whatever he wants, but he's marching to the drum of his own tune there because I don't see him as the Intercept anymore. I see him as that's his platform, okay? Because the Intercept goes into the weeds a lot.
Yeah. All right. From Penguins fan, Alexander, U.S. gives Ukraine Javelin anti-tank missiles. Should Russia give S-400s to Iran and Syria?
Well, Russia has given S-300s to Syria and Iran. It hasn't yet given them S-400s. And
Nor do they need. They don't need them.
Oh, they don't need them. I mean, they haven't asked for them. Iran, by the way, has said that he doesn't want them. So, we should, understand that. Russia has given a lot of support to both Syria and Iran. it now is increasingly openly referring to Iran as an ally. I mean, when the secretary of the Russian Security Council, Mr. Patrushev, first referred to Iran as an ally at this meeting between, that took place in Israel with John Bolton.
Yep.
I did wonder whether that might be a slip, but in fact, more Russian, it wasn't. Well, it wasn't, because more and more very senior Russian officials have been speaking about Iran increasingly in that way, and the Iranians themselves, by the way, are now increasingly picking up on that, and you could see the move,
well, but it's very clear to me, and it's something, and I did a separate video with Alexander Christofor about this, is that the Kingdom of Saud is on the verge of making a pivot, and the Russians know it, and the Russians know it. Okay, and they're going to have to talk. MBS is going to, in one form or another, going to have to make some kind of overture to Iran. The venue may be Iraq, but who is going to be organizing the chairs around the table? Lavrov, and they all know it.
Yeah,
and they all know it. Okay, and so the U.S. Russia and its allies have made a prediction or see a certain vision, and the Saudis are going to have to start mending their ways. And a lot of people in the royal family know it too, okay? And you gotta believe me, the CIA is probing around, looking for their assets, because a lot of people are saying this guy has gone way too far.
Yes.
And the Houthi attack, with the help of Iranians or not, it's immaterial. What's important is it happened. That's the news. It happened.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you can point your fingers all you want, but it happened, and it's creating a political fact on the ground, and it's saying to MBS, look, this is the warm up. This is the preamble. That now it's time. Now it is time, and because it's a cult of personality regime, he will do things for his personal survival. All right. So. That's the pivot we're seeing, and it's going to be big. All right, and and what Russia sees, what Iran sees, is that you can talk about abandoning, but the Americans have to leave the Middle East. It's basically written on the wall. How? I don't know, but it will happen. It has to happen. It has to happen.
Alexander, the javelin's that good?
Well, I am not a military man, Alex, so I'm not going to comment. What I've heard about it, and you can take this as true or not, is that it is extremely expensive, that it is very difficult to use. It requires a lot of training, that it is very advanced and therefore somewhat fragile, that if it works well with a well-trained soldier, it can be very effective. But there are other much simpler anti-tank missiles out there, which are probably equally effective for only a fraction of the cost, and the Russians make some of the best of them. So that's what I've heard.
I just kind of think about it, counterintuitively. I mean, yeah, sure, there's some maybe generals in the Ukrainian army that would like to have these javelins, but I tend to think they would avoid using them, because then you don't have them anymore. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Saudis. We got all this nice shiny stuff here, but they don't know how to use it, and and it's really expensive, and you kind of, it's like a trophy. You know what I mean? I mean, it seems to me that it's counterintuitive, and the Russians have countermeasures for these things. Okay, I mean, you want to fire one of these javelins up, and I don't know how much they cost. That's a lot of money, and it missed. Oh my goodness! I mean, again, the intent is wrong, because it's adding fire to a conflict potentially, but the effect probably will be minimal at best. Okay, it's more of a gesture, and it's not aid. Zelensky wants to buy them. It's not part of the aid package. It's something separate. Okay. Yeah. So again, Trump is saying, oh yeah, well, my guys over in the military industrial complex, they'll love me for this when I got another contract for them. So, there's a lot of moving pieces at the same time.
Peter's absolutely right. I mean, the reason that this talk, of this sale is taking place is that the Zelensky wants those javelins, not because of their military utility, but because they are a symbol of American support for him. That's why they're important for him. As for their effectiveness, I mean, one point I would make is, of course, the one military opponent that they are going to be least effective against is the Russians, because the Russians possess the enormous depth of technological and engineering resources to be able to develop countermeasures very, very, very quickly. As, by the way, contrary to many myths you hear, they did in the 1980s in Afghanistan with the Stinger missiles. I mean, the Russians had figured out how to handle those very, very fast.
And what do you bet? What do you bet? I'm sorry, my cynicism is going to come pouring out right now, but if those javelins are purchased and if they are installed, sooner or later they'll end up in the Donbass because somebody's going to sell them. Okay, well, there's no.
Exactly.
When you have a conflict, like all these kind of conflicts, you know, what is the common denominator? Outright, puerile corruption.
Yes.
That's what's always at the heart of all of these things. These conflicts are to make money, to extort money, to line your pockets, okay? That's what they all have in common, okay? And there are so many people willing to play that game.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, you know, this small cabal of people involved in this, they all make a lot of money. Okay, and if when these weapons are used, it doesn't change political calculus. It's just death and destruction.
Yes.
All right. On Afghanistan, a super chat from David. It's the same team with a few heads changed every time, even in Afghanistan.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
We're in agreement with that. And another super chat from David. Thank you
Very
for
well
the super
put,
chats, David.
Very, very well put, by the way.
Very well put, exactly. Let's see. I wish you would look into the roots of the Afghan conflict in the 90s. It clearly shows who is behind this.
Well, absolutely.
The roots are well known.
If I may say, if you really want to get a sense of where it all began to go wrong, very badly wrong in Afghanistan, you have to go all the way back to the 1970s. There was a, you can call it a coup, you can call it a revolution. A left-wing government came to power in Afghanistan in 1978, which, by the way, had a lot of popular support. There are many, many Afghans in London, many Afghan people in London.
With fond memories.
With very fond memories. I know many of those. And they all say to me, that was Afghanistan's best chance, was that change of government in 1970.
They had mini skirts and ice creams and girls could walk the streets.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
I've seen the pictures. I've been to Kabul. You know what? When you go to Kabul, it's a pretty wretched place, I have to say. But if you look at the architecture, it's all Russian. It's amazing. It's amazing. I recognize it, okay? Because the Russians helped them build that city to its modern level at that time.
Exactly.
Okay? I mean, the presidential palace in Kabul is the former Central Committee of the Afghan Communist Party, whatever it was called. And I mean, that's the presidential palace, isn't it? The former Central Committee. It's amazing.
Exactly. But then what happened in 1978 was Zbigniew Brzezinski came along and said to Jimmy Carter, why don't we arm all these violent jihadi people in Afghanistan and make Afghanistan into this bear trap, which we will draw the Russians in, the Soviets in, and we will exact our revenge against them for what they did to us in Vietnam. And that was the start of it. I mean, from that day to this, Afghanistan has not known a day of.
I think if you
that's the truth of it.
Go to Max Blumenthal's new book. Oh my God, what is the name of the book? I did a program on it. The title of the program was the title of his book. Just go to Amazon, or I don't know if Amazon has banned them, but I mean, look up Max Blumenthal, and he catalogs all of these things. And he starts at Afghanistan. Max Blumenthal is a brilliant guy. He's a lefty, but he's a brilliant guy, and he's on our side when it comes to foreign policy. Look up Max Blumenthal.
Yeah. All right, super chat from David. Peter, Tony Soprano is the real Secretary of State. Every color revolution has been a bust out, enriching the 0.01% for the last 30 years.
We stand corrected.
Any comments on that, Tony Soprano?
Well, no. I mean, in a way, I mean, we lie, we cheat, we steal. I mean, he said that publicly. Okay. I think with the case with Mike Pompeo, it's worse. Okay. He's thuggish, but he's ideologically possessed, and that's what's scary about him. You know, I remember during the run up to the illegal invasion of Iraq in 2003, and everyone said, it's all about oil. It's all about oil. And I would always reply, I wish it were only about oil, okay? Because you have this messianic neocon vision of the world. You have to remember the Cold War hadn't been over for very long, and it was the unipolar moment that we could be the masters of the universe and do anything we want. Wolfowitz even admitted that in the run-up. So Mike Pompeo, he's a pretty spooky guy, okay, because he's very messianic in his views. And when you have someone that is messianic and you give him power, it's a bad mix, okay? It's toxic.
It's absolutely, Peter's got this absolutely right. I mean, the great problem with dealing with American foreign policy at the moment is that it's part ideological crusade and part mafioso protection racket. And it's not always easy to tell where the one begins.
The other one ends.
All right. Alexander, a super chat from Penguins fan. Kerry was an embarrassment as Secretary of State, especially on Syria, where he agreed to a ceasefire and then said Assad must go.
No, Ash Carter blew it up.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the conversations that I would have liked to have heard. You know, I mean, where are the leakers when you need them? You know, when you know, Kerry gets the ceasefire into place and working with the Russians and Lavrov, blah blah. We're gonna get it done, guys. And then, we accidentally. Ash Carter orders it, and they what was it? They lost some. What was that? What's the famous architectural like the stage, you know, and the Russians had a concert there. Palmyra. And then after all of the sacrifice to get Palmyra, Ash Carter destroys the Syrian units, you know, that have been protecting it, and then the terrorists recapture it. Okay, I mean that's exactly what John Kerry was all about. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and the media just let it go by. Okay, but it was two ceasefires that the Russians got the Americans to agree with, and at the last second they blow them up. That's how they dealt with Syria.
Absolutely. I mean, Kerry was a terrible Secretary of State.
Oh, they're all the same now. They're all the same now.
But I mean, it was also with Ukraine. I mean, I can remember all these meetings he had with the Russians about Ukraine, and always there would be promises and agreements made, and they would never be kept. And of course, what one never knows with Kerry or with these people, was he deliberately stringing the Russians along, or was he so weak and ineffectual that, you know, people like Ash Carter and Victoria Nuland and all those other people could just push him aside? I have to say, I think it was the first. Increasingly, I think he was stringing the Russians along a lot.
I don't know. I think you could make just a strong argument the other way around, because when if they're in Geneva or whatever, Lavrov and Kerry, you know, and apparently they liked each other. Right? They're friends, okay, personal. You know, and then they'd be a joint press conference, and they're on the same page. And then Kerry goes to the airport and he says something a little bit different. Then he lands in Washington and it's a little bit more different. Then he gets back to Foggy Bottom and says, well, we didn't agree to that. And it happened over and over again.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced, I don't have evidence, but I'm pretty convinced that these ceasefires, and we'll see it again in the future, the Russians are really good at this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. But you know what happens? It kicks in the back of the head of like people like Kerry and Pompeo. Is it? Well, it wasn't our idea, so it must be wrong. But maybe, and that's that presumption that someone else can't have a good idea. You know, this is this hubris that drives me nuts. Okay, can you have everybody come in and sit at the table? What's your gripe? What do you want? What's your gripe? What do you want? Now let's all work it out here. No, the Americans just go in and say, this is how it should be. And no one is satisfied. No one. Okay? And maybe it's good intentions on the outwardly, but if you don't look at other people's interests, you're never going to get a solution that people can live with. Maybe not happy with, but live with.
Okay, super chat from David. I misspoke. Afghanistan shows more clearly how all these wars are pulled off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Very true.
Okay, guys. I got 2 hours on my phone.
We're trying to. We still got a few more super chats to get through, but we're almost done. From Mark M, super chat: are the PKK and the YPG SDF Kurds Marxist Leninists?
Well, this is a good question. I mean, they are Marxists.
Marxists
by profession, but of course they have their own particular take on Marxism, and one mustn't take these things perhaps too far. Certainly, they would consider themselves leftists, and they are leftists.
Yeah. Okay. They're not jihadists. Okay. No. They're not informed by Islam. Okay. No. But the only thing that they're informed by, at the end of the day, you can take all this ideological layers off. Yeah. There's only one thing that matters. They're Kurds. Okay? Yes. That's what matters. That's what they are.
I mean, essentially, it is an ethnic movement. That is exactly what it is. Yeah.
All right. From Star Trooper, great show, but still no 4XL large shirt sizes. We're working on that. We're going to get those sizes there soon. Star Trooper, thank you for your super chat. From Do You Feel Lucky, $19 super chat. Thank you for being a sane voice inside the asylum. Thank you for that super chat. Do you feel lucky? And thank you for joining us outside the asylum, because that's where we are. From Buck John Duma, super chat, €5. I'm a socialist, but for how long have I been forced to root for Trump now?
I think I know lots of people who share this view. I mean, it's one of the things I've heard people say, you know, I'm on the left, and I find myself continuously now agreeing with people who, you know, are on the right. There is a complete reversal of positions on so many things, but there we are.
That's true. And from Kathleen, a super chat, U.S. media is, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that this is really a sign of where our political language, our lexicon is falling apart.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's about policy or most importantly, you know, we can sound all highfalutin and use big words, okay? But I think what it gets down to is that who is speaking to me? Who is speaking to my struggles in my life? It doesn't have to be a Tory or a Laborite or Republican or Democratic Socialist. But for me, I don't, they're just useless. They're useless labels now. Yes. But at the end of the day, who speaks to you? Yes. Who knows it? Who even knows about you, about your condition, how you feel?
Yes.
And I think that's what people get from Trump in many cases, and what we call, quote unquote, the populist movements in Europe. You know, is anyone listening to me? That's what they're saying. And the political establishment, the traditional left to right continuum, is absolutely useless. It's useless, and it doesn't serve people. It serves the people at the top. It really is a 1% political system that disservices the already fabulously wealthy. And what their job is to keep the rich rich, and to make sure that as the economies of the West are really damaged in so many ways, where people feel no attachment to them. And when you have no attachment to it, then a lot of different things can happen out of your control.
Okay, super chat from Kathleen. U.S. media is so responsible. Phoenix, Arizona here. Thank you for that super chat, Kathleen. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona for a good 4 or 5 years. Love that area. From Lord Brett Sinclair, super chat. To change the subject, Alexander, has Boris got an ace up his sleeve to stave off the Ramoners until
Ramoners?
No, this is Peter. It's becoming actually a standard phrase here, Ramoners, and suits them very well because they do moan quite a lot. Does he have an ace up his sleeve? I don't know. I should say that this is becoming a very complicated situation today. There was apparently a very angry cabinet meeting with a lot of people criticising Johnson within the cabinet, some for being too soft on the EU, some for being too hard. There have been more threats by more Tory MPs, Conservative MPs, to break away from the Conservative Party. And there's going to be another parliamentary session on Saturday, though heavens knows what that's going to achieve. So we're going to do, Alex and I are going to do a Brexit update.
Thank God, not me.
Very soon. And we will be covering all these topics in more depth. But does he have an ace up his sleeve? I genuinely, truly don't know. I am not sure that even he does. I get the sense he's making it up.
I was going to ask you, just making it up as he goes along.
Yeah.
But one thing I'd like to say, and again, the intricacies of Brexit now have gone beyond me. I really have to look to someone like Alexander Mikiris to explain it. But it seems to me, from my perch here so far away in Moscow, is that this whole Brexit exercise is breaking both the Tories and the Labour Party. It's breaking both parties up. That's not a bad thing, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, not just the parties, but also the political system. Sometimes, Peter, if I can just say, seeing these things from a distance gives better perspective. The problem, I have sometimes is because I'm surrounded by it and hearing it all the time. Brexititis.
Yes, a case of Brexititis.
I mean, overall, what you've got to say is this: there is a clear establishment plot to stop Brexit at all costs. That is causing massive damage to the political system. It's breaking up the parties, as you said. It's doing tremendous damage to the constitution. And we're in very uncharted territory. Whether this is going to succeed in the end of stopping Brexit remains to be seen.
At all costs. All right. Patricia Klein, super chat, £5. Thank you, Patricia, for that super chat. From Charlie, super chat, $2. Thank you, Charlie, for that super chat. From Cephas Lamaini, a £4.99 super chat. Thank you for that super chat, Cephas. From Jaiwuku, a £5 super chat. Thank you, Jaiwuku, for that super chat as well. From John Ashley Smith, a Canadian $2 super chat. Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires.
Yep.
Thank you for that super chat, John Ashley. Very correct. From Indigo Jones, a super chat, $5. Alexander, can you explain how a subpoena to appear before Congress is issued and enforced?
Oh, good question. The chairman of committees, congressional committees have the power on behalf of Congress to issue subpoenas. This is a well-known and well-established power. What has happened in this particular case is that they are purporting to issue certain letters, which they are called subpoenas, but which are not subpoenas, on behalf of a impeachment inquiry, which is not yet an impeachment inquiry, which the House has not voted for it. And now simultaneously, it seems that they are also issuing actual congressional subpoenas, which are not technically part of this inquiry, which is not required.
Yeah, but the thing is that you cannot, a congressional committee cannot issue a subpoena without informing the predicate of that subpoena.
What exactly?
Okay. All right. For example, let's look at Benghazi. Okay. There was ample evidence that something was not right. Okay. And that is what the subpoena was about, to investigate irregularities stemming from the State Department's handling of the Benghazi crisis. Okay. But these are not predicated. No. Why do you want to talk to me? Why are you kidding me? What do you want to talk about? About what?
About what? Exactly.
Because there's no predicate for the subpoena. And that's why anyone that is getting a subpoena from these folks on this amorphous thing will say, what's it about? I don't see it.
Correct.
I'm not going. Going. Why?
Exactly. Okay. Or they will challenge them in court. And I predict that before very long, we are going to start seeing court challenges.
And they will get their asses kicked hard.
Yeah.
Okay, super chat from Fern Ballin. What will happen to Sweden And what has the USA that makes us buy obsolete weapons of the USA, i.e. the Patriot?
Okay, first of all, what will happen to Sweden? Well, Sweden is a very rich country. I mean, that is a point that needs to be said clearly. But Sweden and Germany, we did a video, Alex and I, on Sweden quite recently. Sweden and Germany and the other Central European states are now clearly heading for a recession. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I predict that in Sweden, it's going to be a very severe recession. And this is coming on top of a major social crisis, because they've had floods of people from abroad that they've invited in who have not been assimilated properly, and who the current ideology means that they're not being policed properly either. So you're going to have a very difficult situation in Sweden. Sweden is a rich country, but it is going to go through economic and social stresses probably greater than any it has experienced since the Second World War. So just, you know.
Hey, Sweden, go talk to the Saudis about equipment that doesn't work.
Yeah. By the way, Sweden, for everyone to know, is a major arms exporter.
Yeah.
I mean, they export weapons to all kinds of people. How does the United States get you to buy their weapons? Well, it's what we were talking about, Peter and I, before. It's a protection racket to some extent. They are able to squeeze you in all kinds of ways, and they're able to force you to buy their weapons. And very often, lots of countries buy weapons from the United States, frankly, aren't very good or very suitable for them. And other countries, the Saudis are a prime example, they do it the other way around. They say, you know, how are we going to get friends in the United States? We will buy weapons from the United States, and we'll oil lots of palms in the United States and put money under the table and make all kinds of kickbacks and cashbacks and all sorts of things like that. And that way we'll get a lobby. So it's a very corrupt business.
Okay, super chat from Patricia, £5 super chat. Thank you, Patricia. And the final two super chats from Charles Moeller, 350 ZAR super chat. Thanks for all you guys do. Crazy world we live in, where the Western Empire is happy to fund the neo-Nazi militias in Ukraine, but call thinkers like Alexander Dugin fascist.
Very true. Absolutely true. I mean, I should say I'm quite well acquainted with Dugin's ideas, which don't have the traction in Russia that I think a lot of people think they do.
It's such an his influence is so grossly exaggerated.
Exactly. He is not a fascist. I mean, he is interested in some fascist thinkers like Julius Evola, for example, who is a well-known Italian fascist a philosopher of the 30s and 40s, and people like Carl Schmitt, the lawyer and the international lawyer, and people like Martin Heidegger. But he is not actually a fascist. What a lot of people find very difficult to understand this, and whereas those people strutting around in Kiev
yeah, but the thing is that people look for fascism in Dugin's work. That's what they want. They want to find it. Well, he's a Eurasianist, okay? And it is antithetical to what we would traditionally think is fascism, at least fascism based on ethnicity, because Dugin wants the opposite. He wants many different groups to come together. So it really doesn't really make any sense. Western media likes to cherry pick some of his stuff, and then they like to say that he's a personal advisor of Putin, which is absolutely nonsense. No basis in that at all. So he's kind of, a poster boy for what they want to see. Okay, yes. I've read some of his stuff. Okay, Eurasianism. It's not something I'm particularly interested in, and I don't even think really exists. Okay. I can tell you personally, after living here for 21 years, most people I know do not lament this constituent republics of the Soviet Union leaving Russia. I mean, Russia needs to focus on itself, okay, not build factories and infrastructure in Georgia and Armenia and Moldova in the stands, okay? They need to build it for themselves. And I think it's proven to be a positive outcome. I mean, I don't see, when people, hearken back to the Soviet Union, they think of consistency, order, healthcare. No one went hungry. Everyone had housing. A lot of it was bad housing. I mean, they missed that kind of thing. But empire?
No.
Nah, not at all.
I just on finishing on Dugan, I mean, Lavrov has actually written significant critiques of Eurasianism.
Eurasianism, yeah.
So, I mean, with this, we shouldn't overlook that.
Okay, from Indigo Jones Super Chat, thanks guys. All their threats are confusing, referring to the subpoenas question, yeah. Alexander. And the final Super Chat from Michael SEK20. Tulsi Gabbard, question mark.
Very good question. Who's she? I mean, the way that she has been made an unperson by the US media is absolutely extraordinary. And I noticed that, a ray of good sense. She said that she would not be supporting this so-called impeachment of Donald Trump, because she didn't think that there was a case for one. And she's right. I mean, we were talking about the lack of a convincing Democratic Party candidate. There is a convincing Democratic Party candidate, in my opinion.
I agree.
Tulsi says lots of good things on foreign policy, on lots of policies, whilst being also left-wing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the thing is that she staked her campaign on foreign policy, okay, like Ron Paul did previously in the previous campaigns. She's damn convincing. Oh, that's why they don't like her talking. They want to shut her up, okay? Because it's just unless you have a real ability to marshal facts, you can't defeat her in a debate. She's just that good. And on top of it, she speaks with authority. She doesn't use hyperbole. Yeah. She actually uses complete sentences, which is kind of remarkable and refreshing.
Yes.
And she is composed, amazingly composed. And she doesn't, what's the term I want? She never is hunting for a compliment. Okay. She doesn't want people to adore her. All she wants is give me 5 minutes of your time and listen. Okay. She is dangerous to the Democratic Party, big time.
Yes.
Big time. Okay. And from what I can tell on other social issues, I don't agree with her on many, many social issues. But one thing is for sure, she's not as extreme as most of the candidates.
Or as strident, or anywhere near.
She's measured. She's measured.
Yeah. I still would like to believe, I can't say that I think or know, because I don't know American politics sufficiently well, but I still hope that she will make a bigger impression in some of the primaries than she's been able to do up to now.
One thing is for sure, this is my prediction. Obviously, she's not going to get the nomination. Okay, but what is she doing? She's a young woman, and she's got a future ahead of her. Yeah. And all of the shenanigans with Biden and with Clinton, it's going to remind a lot of people in the party that they want to break away from the past. Yeah. And this Green New Deal nonsense, oh my goodness. I mean, the Heartland is going to say, what? But she goes to the Heartland. She talks to people. Yes. I think I catch almost every single video that she puts out. And she is very appealing. And I will even say presidential. Yes. All right. Because the rest of them are frauds. Yes. Total frauds. Yes. Okay? Yes. Lightweight frauds.
Well, indeed, including Elizabeth Warren, who most of her life has been a right-wing Republican.
Now. But she's a very interesting wild card because, as the three of us were on WhatsApp yesterday, I still contend that she has a likability more than most of the candidates. Okay, there's something about her. She can convey authenticity, which voters crave. That's why they voted for Trump. Okay. I like him or dislikes him. He's a real McCoy, that guy. Okay. Elizabeth Warren does have the likability quotient to her. So does Tulsi. But if you give her a chance, I mean, she's on alternative. She's on with Matt Taibbi over at Rolling Stone. I think that I think the Young Turks might have had her on. Pretty sure that's the case. A whole slew of people want to talk to her. Okay, and she's getting it. She's making an impact. Okay, she's doing it with alternative media. So I think she has a political future, and I'll be keeping an eye on her. Okay, again, she's reasonable on things that are important to me.
Yeah.
Okay, and Sparky gives us the final super chat and we'll wrap it up. $5. Real journalist Lee Stranahan was exposing this Ukraine issue before anyone. Watch he and Garland Nixon's vidcast on
and
radio.
I've been on there many times chewing on this story with them 9 months ago, even longer. Okay, everyone's catching up with us.
Yes.
All right, and Indigo Jones comes in with the final super chat. Tulsi should have Pompeo's job. Yes,
Yes.
I will agree to that, Indigo.
God bless.
So,
God bless.
very much so. And we'll end it on that note. Guys, thank you for everyone who's tuned in to this live stream. Remember, hit that like, subscribe to the channel, click that notifications bell, donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and subscribe. Star, your donations help keep this channel growing and moving forward as we approach 100,000 subscribers. And of course, go to the Duran shop and pick up some really awesome Duran merchandise. Alexander did a great job today showcasing that Lavrov mug as he was answering questions. And that is a beautiful mug, magic mug. Peter, what are you checking out this week?
We're going to
days are remaining for the weekend next.
Tomorrow we'll do a recording on demystifying Syria and the Kurds. Exactly what we talked about today.
And that'll air on Friday. Correct?
Friday.
All right. And thank you, Balke John Duma, for that last minute £2 super chat. Thank you very much. Thank you, Valies, as well, for that chat message. Alexander, what are you checking out this week outside of a Brexit update that we're going to do?
Which, poor us. But other than that, obviously, the developments in Syria are hugely important. We'll see where Ukrainegate is going. And there's all these negotiations now underway between the US and China on a trade deal. And we'll see whether anything comes of that. There's also talk that the US is preparing tariffs against imports. So we'll see whether that will amount to anything also. That could be very bad for the Germans.
Okay, we'll do some videos on that hopefully as well this week. And for people asking, that is not my artwork in the background. I am at an Airbnb right now. So this is not my usual background. For those people asking in the chat, what's that painting? It's just an Airbnb thing. I'm in Romania right now, Bucharest, if anyone is interested. All right. So on that note, Peter in Moscow, Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk in Moscow. Thank you very much. And Alexander Verkers, the Oracle of London, of course, in London. Thank you very much, Alexander, and to everyone out there in the world, wherever you are, morning, afternoon, evening, take care. Have a great rest of the week.